Chapter 96. Chinyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Thaling, I'm not asking for any secrets about my master. I just want the star formation in exchange for the earth ginseng. Sitting cross-legged in the practice room, Yuharan explained his attitude to Thaling through his mind. Here you are. When Yuharan went straight to the practice room, Thaling had already guessed his thoughts. Therefore, he had already prepared and directly transmitted the formation about gathering the power of the stars to Yuharan. Carefully reading the formation about gathering the power of the stars that Thaling gave him, Yuharan found that this formation was one that he had never heard of or seen in his previous life. This formation seemed to be very similar to the spirit-gathering formation that gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, but some of the techniques and marks that connected with the power of heaven and earth could not be compared with the current formations. Thaling, this formation that gathers the power of the stars is very different from the current formations, could it be? Yes, this formation that gathers the power of the stars was indeed made by an expert in ancient times. Although Yuharan did not say it explicitly, Thaling knew what he meant, so he directly admitted it and explained. However, after going through the three disasters in ancient times, the Middle Ages, and the near-ancient times, not only did the environment and spiritual chi of the Tianxian continent change dramatically, but the position of the stars also changed. Therefore, this set of formations has been modified by several generations of experts, as well as my own understanding of formations, and has been simplified. Speaking of this, Thaling was afraid that Yuharan would be disappointed, so he encouraged him. Of course, as long as your cultivation reaches the martial sage realm and you can perceive the power of law, then I will give you the complete star formation. Yuharan did not care that the gathering formation given by Thaling was only a simplified version, because through the comprehension just now, he knew that even if it was a simplified version of the star-gathering formation, the amount of star power gathered was enough for him to use at his current stage. Moreover, the complete version of the star formation required a higher level of cultivation and comprehension. With his current cultivation and strength, it would be difficult for him to set up the complete version of the star formation in a short period of time. Therefore, the simplified version of the star formation was the most suitable formation for the current stage. After the conversation ended, Yuharan calculated the time and found that there was still some time before the stars appeared at night. Taking advantage of this time, he took out the wooden box containing the earth ginseng from the victor and cut off 1/10 of the remaining earth ginseng. He planned to use the enormous energy contained in the earth ginseng to increase his potential and break through to the second grade of martial warrior. Time passed by second. The bottleneck of the second grade of martial warrior did not pose too much of a problem to him. With the enormous energy contained in the earth ginseng, not only did he easily break through to the second grade of martial warrior, but he also directly reached the peak of the second grade of martial warrior. If he still had spirit stones, even if they were only of the third grade of the ninth grade, he could use them to reach the peak of the second grade of martial warrior in the shortest amount of time possible. However, in order to break through to the peak of the 10th grade of martial disciple realm, not only did he use up all the resources provided by the sect, but he also used up all the third grade of the 9th grade spirit stones he obtained from his family's treasury. Now, he only had one bottle of 9th grade of the 10th grade of the Qi recovery pill left. Unless he continued to consume the earth ginseng and used its enormous energy to break through, it would be difficult for him to reach the peak of the second grade of martial warrior in a short period of time. Opening his eyes, Yuharan calculated the time and discovered that it was already evening. The stars in the sky were about to appear, so he directly got up and left the cultivation room. He stood in the courtyard and observed the stars in the sky. Today's weather was quite good. Not only were there no clouds in the sky, but the sky was also densely covered with stars. It was the best time to set up a star-gathering formation. Although the star-gathering formation given to him by Thaling was only a simplified version, there were two ways to set it up. The first method was to use various magic tools or materials to gather the power of the stars in a large area. Although with his understanding of formations from his previous life, he could set up the first type of formation, not to mention the magic tools, he did not even have the materials to refine them. Therefore, he could only use the second method to set up the formation, which was to use the combination of Yuan Li and the imprint to gather the power of the stars in a small area. Although the cultivation of the reckless bull fist made his physical body much stronger than the average warrior, compared to the elite disciples of the top and first-rate sects, his physical strength was still far inferior. Moreover, he had only scratched the surface of the star incantation given to him by Thaling. Gathering the power of the stars in a small area was just right for his current state. Using the imprint method to gather the power of the stars was considered as forcibly gathering the scattered power of the stars in the surroundings. Therefore, every imprint required a certain amount of Yuan Li. In order to complete the imprint required to set up the formation, he needed to form a total of 13 imprints. Therefore, before he formed the imprint, he took out the energy recovery pill given to him by the sect. He planned to use the energy recovery pill to replenish his Yuan Li when he ran out of Yuan Li. After finding an open space suitable for gathering the power of the stars, Yu Haoran directly sat cross-legged on the ground. He then closed his eyes and recalled the imprints related to setting up the formation. After he had completely memorized these imprints, Yu Haoran directly mobilized the Yuan Li in his dantian and began to condense the imprint of the formation. As the first imprint slowly took shape, the Yuan Li in his dantian rapidly decreased like a flood breaking through a dam. Fortunately, by the time the first imprint was successfully formed, the Yuan Li in his dantian had been consumed less than 10%. This was also due to his successful breakthrough to the martial disciple 10th grade, which allowed the capacity of his dantian to be more than 10 times that of an ordinary martial artist. Otherwise, each imprint would consume at least 70% of his Yuan Li. With such a large consumption, he was afraid that he would need to rely on the help of an imprint to recover once. After the first imprint was successfully formed, the speed of the subsequent imprints became faster and faster, and the consumption of Yuan Li also became less and less. Even so, by the time the 12th imprint was condensed, the Yuan Li in his dantian had already consumed 90% of his Yuan Li. Considering that there was still one more imprint to be condensed, and after gathering the power of the stars, he still needed to use the fusion of Yuan Li and the power of the stars to enhance the strength of his physical body and further improve his cultivation. Therefore, he temporarily stopped condensing the imprint and chose to take the energy recovery pill that he had already prepared to recover the Yuan Li he had consumed. Just as Yu Haoran took the energy recovery pill to recover the Yuan Li he had used to condense the imprint, Thaling in the victor was already looking at him with a face full of shock. Thaling had personally modified the simplified formation, so he was very familiar with the amount of Yuan Li that was required to condense the imprint. Originally, he had thought that even if Yu Haoran relied on the capacity of his dantian that was more than 10 times that of an ordinary martial artist, he would at most be able to condense 5 to 6 imprints before the Yuan Li in his dantian would be completely depleted. Chapter 97. Clear Cloud Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Yu Haoran, who had taken the origin recovery pill to recover his Yuan Li, couldn't help but frown. The origin recovery pill given by the sect was a 10th level 9th grade pill. Not only could it satisfy the cultivation of a 9th grade martial disciple, it was also very effective for cultivators below the 3rd grade martial warrior level. According to normal calculations, a single origin recovery pill could recover at least 70 to 80% of Yuan Li. Even if the capacity of the dantian was 10 times that of a normal martial artist, a single origin recovery pill could recover at least 20% of Yuan Li. But what about the actual recovery rate? A single origin recovery pill couldn't even recover 5% of Yuan Li, much less 20%. This made Yu Haoran worried. He was worried that in the future, if he used too much Yuan Li, the recovery process would be very difficult. Or it could be said that he needed higher-grade medicinal pills to recover the essence energy that he expended. Fortunately, with his rich cultivation experience, he temporarily threw this worry out of his mind and focused on recovering the Yuan Li in his Dantian. Since a 10th level 9th grade origin recovery pill was not effective, then what about 3, 5, or 9 pills? In order to recover the Yuan Li in his Dantian as soon as possible, Yu Haoran directly swallowed all the origin recovery pills in the pill bottle. Then, with the help of the 10 origin recovery pills, he recovered 50% of his Yuan Li in the shortest amount of time. With the amount of Yuan Li stored in his Dantian, 50% of his Yuan Li was enough to combine with the power of the stars to increase his cultivation. Therefore, Yu Haoran continued to mobilize the Yuan Li in his Dantian and began to condense the last imprint. When the last imprint slowly took shape, a faintly discernible pulling force began to slowly gather the power of the stars in the sky. Feeling the effect of the last imprint, Yu Haoran was overjoyed. Then, using the gathering formation given by the Thaling, he imprinted the last imprint in the predetermined position. When the last imprint was imprinted in the predetermined position, the faint pulling force began to increase, and the scattered power of the stars in the sky began to gather around him. As more and more power of the stars were attracted, it enveloped Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, gradually turned into a dazzling star. Fortunately, in order to avoid attracting the attention of a certain person, Thaling had already set up a concealment barrier in advance. For the time being, no one had discovered the abnormality of the hidden moon pavilion. Yu Haoran was overjoyed when he felt the energy of the stars gathering around him become denser and denser, and he hurriedly circulated the astral battle formula to start absorbing the energy of the stars to temper his body. When the dense star energy was swallowed by the astral battle mantra and seeped into his body, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised to find that besides tempering the body, the star energy also had a tempering effect on the soul in his sea of consciousness. However, compared to the tempering of the physical body, the power of the stars did not have an obvious effect on the tempering of the soul. If it weren't for the fact that his mental state was very strong and he had a certain amount of experience in the study of the soul, it would have been very difficult for him to feel the improvement in his soul. Not only could it strengthen the body, but it could also increase the strength of the soul. Yu Haoran attached great importance to the power of the astral battle formula and decided that in the future, as long as he had time, he would cultivate the astral battle formula with all his might. Yu Haoran, who was immersed in his cultivation, did not feel the passage of time at all. When he discovered that the star energy around him had begun to decrease, he finally returned to his senses. Although the sky was not yet bright, the stars in the sky had already begun to disappear. Taking advantage of the fact that there was still some star energy around him, he seized the remaining time to continue cultivating. When the star energy had completely disappeared, Yu Haoran did not hurry to leave. Instead, he continued to sit cross-legged on the slightly moist ground and felt the changes that a night of cultivation had on his body. Because the effect of the star energy on the tempering of the soul was very weak, he could not feel any changes in his soul after a night of cultivation. However, the effect of the star energy on the tempering of the body was very obvious. With the help of the barbaric ox fist technique and the strengthening of his body when he broke through to the martial warrior realm, his body was at the early 5th grade martial warrior realm before he started cultivating the astral doart. Then, after a night of absorbing and tempering the star energy, his body's grade had now reached the middle stage of a 5th grade martial warrior. Although it was only a small increase in a small realm, the effect was very shocking. Because spirit energy was easy to cultivate, tempering the body was very difficult. Not only did it require a long time, but it also required a large amount of energy. Normally, if a martial artist wanted to increase the grade of their body by a small realm, It would take at least 10 days to half a month, and at most 1 to 2 months. But what about him? He only used less than a night's time. This speed was enough to prove the power of the astral battle formula. Seeing that Yu Haoran had finished cultivating and had opened his eyes, Thaling asked, "Yu Haoran, how do you feel? The astral battle formula is probably not inferior to a heaven-tier cultivation technique. A formation that gathers the star energy is terrifying. It's comparable to a peak profound tier formation, or even an early earth tier formation." Combined with his feelings after a night of cultivation, Yu Haoran gave what he believed to be the best evaluation of the astral Do arts and formations. "Yu Haoran, the true power of the astral battle formula will have to wait until you cultivate it to a high level before you can truly feel the power of the body refining technique. As for the formation that gathers the star energy, if it is arranged using a magic tool, the amount of star energy involved will make you feel fear." Although Yu Haoran gave a very high evaluation, Thaling was not very satisfied. Therefore, he explained the power of the astral battle formula and the formation that gathers the star energy. Yu Haoran did not refute this. Not to mention the 13 magic tools needed to arrange the formation, even finding the materials to refine the formation was a very difficult task. Not to mention, he was not an expert in refining tools, and the 100 Qi Gate did not have a sect that refined tools. Therefore, he did not take Thaling's words to heart for the time being about the effects of using magic tools to arrange the formation. After using the star energy to cultivate for a night, Yu Haoran felt that the strength of his physical body was completely capable of withstanding the gravity technique formed by the 9th-level thick mountain bear's blood essence. Therefore, he planned to go to the Hall of Merit and use the secret area to refine his physical body. More accurately, he planned to use the magic tool to refine his physical body and continue to increase the strength of his physical body. After finishing his cultivation, Yu Haoran first returned to his bedroom to change into a green robe exclusive to the inner disciples of the 100 Qi Gate. Then, he went straight to the canteen of the Qingyun Peak. Although martial artists absorbed the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into their bodies and needed less food, they still needed to eat a certain amount before breaking through to the martial ancestor realm. Moreover, he was going to use the gravity technique to refine his physical body. Not only did it consume Yuanli, but it also consumed a shocking amount of physical strength. Therefore, he needed to replenish his energy in advance. The 38 peaks of the 100 Qi Gate all had canteens, but the people in charge of the canteens were all service disciples with low cultivation and average qualifications. Only the Qingyun Peak was an exception. This was because when Feng Qingyun first became a disciple of the Qingyun Peak, as his servant, second senior brother Lu Guangwei entered the Qingyun Peak as a service disciple and was responsible for the chores in the canteen. Although Feng Qingyun later broke through to the Martial King realm and became the peak master of the Qingyun Peak, second senior brother did not give up the management of the canteen and often stayed in the canteen. Fortunately, there were very few disciples in the Qingyun Peak. For example, the disciples of Chu Zhongyu's generation were not greedy and did not want to be served by others. Therefore, they did not recruit service disciples from the Trial Peak. Chapter 98. Qingyun Peak in front of the cafeteria. When Yu Haoran arrived at the cafeteria, he saw second senior brother Lu Guangwei lying leisurely under a big tree with his eyes closed. Although second senior brother's aptitude was not very outstanding, he had been Feng Qingyun's servant since they were young. The two of them had a very close relationship, so he had received the most care. Logically speaking, with the care of Feng Qingyun, who might be a martial emperor expert, Lu Guangwei's cultivation should not have advanced so slowly. However, it was because of his lazy and unenterprising character that his cultivation progress was so slow. When he was less than 3 meters away from second senior brother, Yu Haoran called out softly, "Second senior brother." "Hey! Ninth junior brother, Why are you here? Hearing someone call him, Lu Guangwei opened his eyes and looked at the person who had come. He immediately asked in surprise. Then, he slapped his forehead and said self-reproachfully, "Oh right, I forgot that you and 10th junior brother are still martial disciples. You need to eat." Then, without allowing Yu Haoran to speak, he turned around and went straight to the kitchen. At the same time, he said excitedly, "9th junior brother, just you wait. Wait for senior brother to make you an unforgettable meal." Looking at second senior brother who went straight to the kitchen with a face full of excitement, Yu Haoran could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. However, he did not try to persuade him. This was because he knew his second senior brother's character and conduct very well. He knew that serving his master well was his lifelong pursuit. However, due to his own aptitude and lazy character, his second senior brother knew that his achievements in martial arts would not be too high. Therefore, he could only focus on food. His biggest wish in life was to be able to make food that martial kings, martial emperors, martial sages, martial honors, and even Emperor Wu could not refuse. Yu Haoran knew that he had a way to fulfill second senior brother's wish. However, the prerequisite was that his cultivation had to break through the martial ancestor realm and be able to use the power of his soul. Only then could he take second senior brother to a secret place to accept the inheritance of a peak martial sage expert who had entered the Tao through food. He walked to the chair where second senior brother had been lying and sat down. He enjoyed a rare moment of peace through the gaps in the leave. However, this peace did not last long before it was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Slightly raising his head, Yu Haoran saw that the person who had come was Wu Jingjun, who had been cultivating in seclusion for the past 2 days. In fact, after obtaining 1/5 of Batianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence, Yu Haoran had gone to find Wu Jingjun, hoping that he could use sky-devouring snake's blood essence to further unlock the bloodthirsty physique. However, when he arrived at the Veiled Dragon Pavilion where Wu Jingjun resided, he found that Wu Jingjun was already in closed-door cultivation. In desperation, he could only choose to temporarily use the earth ginseng to stimulate his special constitution. Ninth Senior. Wu Jingjun was stunned when he saw Yu Haoran lying on the recliner. "In a while, I will use the secret realm to temper my body. I need to replenish my strength in advance, so I asked second senior brother to prepare food for me." Seeing the confusion on Wu Jingjun's face, Yu Haoran immediately knew what he was thinking, so he explained. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Wu Jingjun was relieved. His tone was full of joy as he said, "Coincidentally, I will also use the secret realm to temper my body and then use the improvement of my body to further activate my special physique." "Okay, go tell second senior brother and come back. I have something to tell you." Yu Haoran agreed with Wu Jingjun's idea of using the improvement of his body to further activate his bloodthirsty physique. However, compared to using the secret realm to further activate his special physique, the effect of using sky-devouring snake's blood essence was far better. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to tell him that after he finished tempering in the secret realm, he could go to the Hidden Moon Pavilion to receive sky-devouring snake's blood essence. In this way, he could also refine Batianxiang's blood essence in front of Wu Jingjun and strengthen his confidence in following him. After all, if the two of them refined Batianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence together, it would also prove that he truly regarded him as a brother. The Clear Cloud Peak's dining hall was very small. Other than the dining hall, there was a kitchen at the back. Therefore, Wu Jingjun did not spend too much time and came back. "Jingjun, what realm is your cultivation now?" Yu Haoran asked when Wu Jingjun came back. "I just broke through to the martial warrior realm yesterday, and now I have barely stabilized my realm," Wu Jingjun replied truthfully. "Yu Haoran, Wu Jingjun's current state is not the best time to use sky-devouring snake's blood essence." Just as Yu Haoran was about to nod and reveal sky-devouring snake's blood essence, The victor's Thaling reminded him in a timely manner. Why? Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. When they were fighting for the Ginseng's mountain peak, if it weren't for the unexpected appearance of the mastermind, the Thaling had planned to let him and Wu Jingjun directly refine Ba Tianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence. Why did it say that now was not the best time to use it? Yu Haoran, whether it's Ba Tianxiang or sky-devouring snake, they are not only 8th level and 9th level exotic beasts, but also contain the bloodline of ancient divine beasts. The energy contained in their blood essence is very shocking. In the process of refining and consuming, the energy that explodes will have a great impact on the body. If the physical strength of the body is not strong enough, it is very likely that the body will not be able to withstand the impact of the blood essence, and eventually explode and die. Thaling, aren't you harming me and Wu Jingjun? Hearing the consequences of the body not being able to withstand the impact of the blood essence explosion, Yu Haoran felt a wave of lingering fear, and couldn't help but complain to the Thaling. In the face of Yu Haoran's complaints, the Thaling was not angry, and patiently explained, "The situation is different. When the two exotic beasts perished together, the energy in the blood essence was already at its lowest, and under the effect of mutual promotion and suppression, the ancient divine blood in the bloodline of the two exotic beasts was completely dormant. At that time, even if the physical body could not withstand the impact of the blood essence explosion, at most some energy would be wasted, and it would not cause any harm to the physical body. But after a period of rest, the ancient divine blood in the blood essence will revive and counteract the forced refining of the blood essence, so Wu Jingjuan's current state is not suitable for consuming the blood essence. So that's how it is." After hearing the Thaling's explanation, Yu Haoran suddenly understood and couldn't help but feel apologetic for his previous complaints, so he sincerely apologized to the Thaling. "I'm sorry, I was too impatient." "It's fine," Thaling continued, indicating that he didn't care. "After the astral battle arts, with your current physical strength, you can consume the blood essence of the heavenly elephant, but Wu Jingjun is still far from it. His physical body must be at least a 6th-grade martial warrior before he can consume the blood essence of the sky-devouring snake." "Thaling, what level is Wu Jingjuan's physical body at now?" "Only a 6th-grade martial warrior could consume the blood essence of the sky-devouring snake." So Yu Haoran wanted to know the specific level of Wu Jingjuan's current level. Although the bloodthirsty body is a special body constitution, he has only unlocked 1/10 of it, and his physical body is barely at the peak of a 2nd-grade martial warrior. Chapter 99. Clear Cloud Peak, in front of the dining hall. He was at the peak of 2nd-grade martial warrior, 4 small realms away from the 6th-grade martial warrior. Considering that raising the grade of the fleshly body was far more difficult than raising the level of cultivation, Yu Haoran began to think about how to quickly raise the grade of Wu Jingjuan's fleshly body. Thaling's source energy was not only suitable for increasing the grade of the body, but also for awakening special constitutions. However, the source energy was the foundation of magic tools. Consuming too much of the source energy would harm the Thaling. Thus, as soon as this idea appeared, he immediately discarded it. The Earth Ginseng's effect was similar to the Thaling's source energy. It was very suitable for Wu Jingjuan's current state. However, considering that his sister Yusiki also had a special constitution, she also needed to use the Earth Ginseng to further awaken and strengthen her special constitution. Considering their close relationship, he had to consider his sister's future first. Thus, he could not give the Earth Ginseng to Wu Jingjun. The Astral Do Arts was also suitable for Wu Jingjun. Moreover, according to the conditions he had exchanged with the Thaling, the Astral Do Arts was already his personal property. He had the right to decide how to deal with it. However, if he wanted to use the Astral Do Arts to strengthen his body, he had to be able to use a formation that gathered the power of the stars. He was able to easily use a formation that gathered the power of the stars because he was proficient in formations in his previous life. He was able to understand, master, and set up a formation in the shortest amount of time. But what about Wu Jingjun? Based on the comprehension he displayed during the entrance exam, it would take him 3 to 5 years to master a formation that gathered the power of the stars. Thus, it would be better to use other methods to strengthen his body than to absorb the power of the stars scattered between heaven and earth. After thinking about it, Yu Haoran discovered that none of the treasures and methods he possessed could help Wu Jingjun. This made him very disappointed. Ninth senior brother, what's wrong? After learning that he had broken through to the first-grade martial warrior, Yu Haoran fell into a long period of contemplation. This made Wu Jingjun very surprised. Could it be that Yu Haoran still hadn't broken through to the martial warrior realm? On second thought, this was simply impossible. Based on Yu Haoran's performance in the sect selection competition, the martial warrior realm could not possibly be an obstacle to him. Therefore, he couldn't help but ask. I'm fine, Yu Haoran said with a smile as he waved his hand at Wu Jingjun. Then, he suddenly thought of the word bloodthirsty in Wu Jingjun's bloodthirsty constitution. He suddenly remembered that in his previous life, he had killed a demonic cultivator in the martial royal realm and obtained a set of secret methods from him. It was a secret method that could not only rapidly increase one's cultivation and strength, but also strengthen one's body. Of course, the side effects of that secret technique were extremely severe, and he was worried that it would negatively affect Wu Jingjun. However, whether or not he could eliminate or weaken the side effects of the secret technique, he still had a trump card. That was the omniscient and omnipotent Thaling. Thaling, I have a set of secret techniques here that can be used to increase one's cultivation and strength, as well as strengthen one's body by devouring and refining the blood essence of living creatures. Unlike Thaling, he couldn't directly use his spiritual energy to condense the secret technique and imprint it into his knowledge. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only use his consciousness to read the secret technique word by word to Thaling. So it's the modified version of the devouring the heavens and earth technique. After hearing Yu Haoran's description of the secret technique, Thaling said with a smile, Yu Haoran, don't worry. I will modify and simplify this secret technique. I guarantee that there won't be any side effects, and this secret technique will also be suitable for you to cultivate. After receiving Thaling's assurance, Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he said to Wu Jingjun, Jingjun, after using the secret realm to temper my body, I will go to the depths of the mountains to train. At that time, you will come with me. I will teach you a secret technique so that you can use this secret technique to further strengthen your body, as well as quickly increase your cultivation and strength. Thank you, ninth senior brother. Although Wu Jingjun was very touched by Yu Haoran's care, under the influence of the bloodthirsty constitution, he was becoming less and less good at expressing his feelings. Being able to say thank you was already the best way to express his inner feelings. You're welcome. Yu Haoran waved his hand and said casually. Just as the two of them finished talking, second senior brother's voice came from the kitchen next to the cafeteria. Ninth junior brother, 10th junior brother, it's time to eat. Let's go, Yu Haoran said as he stood up from the recliner and took the lead to walk to the cafeteria. After he and Wu Jingjun sat down, Lu Guangwei walked in with a wooden basin the size of a water basin in each hand. He then placed the 2 wooden basins on the dining table. Ninth junior brother, 10th junior brother, your luck is not bad. Last night, I went to the depths of the mountains to look for a spiritual herb and accidentally found a 10th level 9th grade green-spotted snake and a 9th level 1st grade blue-spotted tiger. These 2 exotic beasts can be said to be the most suitable ingredients for making delicious food. Not only do they have sufficient yuan li and stamina, but their taste is also quite outstanding. Have a taste. Lu Guangwei introduced as he took out 2 pairs of 40-centimeter-long chopsticks. Yu Haoran had tasted second senior brothers cooking more than once in his previous life. Of course, he knew how tempting the food was. Otherwise, if he wanted to have sufficient stamina, he could just eat whatever he wanted and not waste time looking for second senior brother in the cafeteria. There was no need to choose, because all the bones of the meat had been removed, and every piece of meat was very uniform in size. When they put the meat into their mouths, a strong meaty aroma rushed to their taste buds, making them feel refreshed, as if all the pores on their body were opened. More importantly, the meat was made from 10th level and 9th level exotic beasts. The meat contained energy nourished by spiritual energy. While satisfying their taste buds, it also strengthened their physical body. The yuan li in their dantian was also slowly increasing. I'm afraid this is the most delicious stew I've ever eaten in my life. Wu Jingjun, who had also swallowed a piece of meat, was so stimulated by the delicious taste that even his bloodthirsty physique couldn't control his emotions. He couldn't help but praise. Seeing Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjuan's faces full of enjoyment, Lu Guangwei, who was also satisfied, said with a smile, "All right, as long as you guys are willing to eat it, I'll make it for you often in the future." After enjoying the first piece of stew, Yu Haoran promised his second senior brother, if there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely capture some precious exotic beasts and let you make delicacies that will tempt even martial kings, martial emperors, and even martial sages. Senior brother, I'll be waiting. Yu Haoran's suggestion was exactly what Lu Guangwei had been pursuing, so he was touched as if he had met a soulmate. After that, he gestured to Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun to hurry up and eat, so that they could go to the secret realm to temper their bodies later. Warriors, especially those in the martial warrior realm. This was because tempering the body would consume a lot of yuan li and physical strength, so a lot of energy would need to be replenished. The stew that Lu Guangwei made not only contained abundant energy, but was also very delicious. In just a few minutes, the 2 big basins of stew were finished by Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun. Second senior brother, we'll take our leave first, Yu Haoran said as he stood up and bade farewell after finishing the last drop of stew in the wooden basin. If the people from the Hall of Achievements dare to cause trouble for you, they can come directly to me. Just as Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun stood up to leave the dining hall, the second senior brother, who was tidying up the wooden basins, suddenly spoke. Without needing to ask, Yu Haoran already knew what his second senior brother meant. However, things were different now. He was confident that he could face any trouble from the Hall of Achievements. Chapter 100. Qingyun Peak was located on the eastern side of the 100 Qi Gates 38 Peak. It was 7 peaks away from the Hall of Merit, which was about 30 miles away. Therefore, after leaving the cafeteria, Yu Haoran asked for Wu Jingjuan's permission and directly used Gale steps to bring him to the Hall of Merit. The 7 peaks seemed very far away, but with the support of Gale steps, it took less than 2 hours for Yu Haoran to bring Wu Jingjun to the Hall of Merit. Unlike the other peaks where the buildings were either at the peak or halfway up the mountain, the Hall of Merit was built at the foot of the mountain. Looking at the dense crowd in front of him, Yu Haoran couldn't help but frown. In the 100 Qi Gate, the Hall of Merit had the most authority. For example, it was responsible for distributing the benefits of the disciples, arranging the missions that the disciples needed to carry out, issuing the missions and rewards for the elders and the upper echelons of the sect, being responsible for the exchange of resources, and so on. It could be said that the Hall of Merit was the most lively and bustling place in the entire 100 Qi Gate. But even if the Hall of Merit was lively, it was impossible to gather so many people like today. Moreover, these people weren't moving around inside the Hall of Merit. Instead, they were all crowded outside the Hall of Merit. It was obvious that they were watching something. Because the scene was very noisy, Yu Haoran couldn't tell what was going on. Although he did not want to get involved in these miscellaneous matters, These people were blocking the path to the Hall of Merit. Helpless, he could only let Wu Jingjun stand behind him, and then use his powerful physical body to forcibly squeeze forward. At first, the people who were pushed aside weren't happy, but because of their strength and status, they could only choose to endure when they saw the green robes unique to inner sect disciples. However, when Yu Haoran squeezed into the inner circle, and the people he pushed aside were all wearing the same robes and had stronger auras, these people were immediately unhappy. Not only did they turn their heads and stare fiercely at Yu Haoran, but they also used their powerful strength to block in front of Yu Haoran again. "Get out of the way, I want to enter the achievement hall." To be able to rely on their strength to block him, apart from inner court disciples who had reached the martial master realm, outer court disciples who had reached the martial warrior realm did not have the ability to do so. Even so, Yu Haoran was not afraid in the slightest. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant. Why don't you tell me where you came from and let me broaden my horizons?" Yu Haoran's cultivation base was completely unfathomable, as he had only used his physical body and not a single trace of elemental energy. However, judging from Yu Haoran's youthful face, he was at most 16 or 17 years old. It was impossible for him to break through to the martial master realm at such an age. Therefore, the other party suspected that Yu Haoran might have relatives in the sect. Furthermore, they were also inner sect disciples in the martial master realm. He was just borrowing their clothes. "My name is Yu Haoran. I don't have any backing in the sect." How could Yu Haoran not know what the other party was up to? However, he was not afraid that the other party would find out about his background. "Yu Haoran." After hearing Yu Haoran's introduction, the other party could not help but ponder. However, he did not have the slightest impression of him. "I am the champion of this year's new disciple aptitude test and ranking competition." Knowing that the other party would not be able to recall who he was, he took the initiative to remind him. "So you are the peerless genius with the highest talent, potential, comprehension and perseverance among this year's new disciples." After hearing Yu Haoran's reminder, the other party instinctively took a step back and pointed at Yu Haoran as he exclaimed in surprise. Among the previous disciples of the 100 Chi Gate, most of the disciples with the highest talent, potential, comprehension and perseverance were only at the middle or peak of the martial emperor realm. If a disciple with the potential to become a beginner martial sage, it would cause a sensation in the entire sect. However, this time, the number of new disciples with the potential to become beginner martial sages had reached 5. Yu Haoran, who had won the double championship, was a peerless genius whose talent, potential, comprehension and perseverance were all at the peak of the martial sage realm. Of course, this would cause a huge sensation in the 38 peaks of the 100 Chi Gate. Although he knew that with his martial master realm, it would be easy for him to defeat Yu Haoran, he knew even more clearly that he could not make a move. If he made a move, not only would the martial ancestor realm's senior brothers behind Yu Haoran find trouble with him, even the law enforcement peak would not let him off. After all, he was only an ordinary inner sect disciple. The highest achievement he had ever achieved in his life was only a martial ancestor. What about Yu Haoran? He was a peerless genius who could become a martial king, a martial emperor or even a martial sage. The sect would definitely side with Yu Haoran. "You can go in." Relying on his strength, he forcefully pushed back a person and opened up a path forward. The inner court disciple admitted defeat as he spoke. He only wanted to use the magic weapon to temper his physical body before going into the depths of the mountain range to train. Furthermore, the other party did not offend him too much. Thus Yu Haoran did not push his luck. He nodded at the other party and led Wu Jingjun past him. The conflict just now had attracted the attention of a portion of the surrounding people. After learning of Yu Haoran's identity, these inner sect disciples dressed in green robes who had reached the martial master realm all chose to avoid him. They allowed Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun to squeeze into the innermost part of the crowd. When Yu Haoran stood in the innermost part of the crowd, he finally understood the reason for the crowd's gathering. It turned out that at the main entrance of the Hall of Merit, a youth dressed in tattered green robes was standing at the entrance with a sharp sword in hand. Furthermore, from the dense killing intent that constantly emanated from his body, it was obvious that he was looking for trouble with the Hall of Merit. So it's him. After seeing the youth's appearance clearly, Yu Haoran's face flashed with a hint of surprise. The youth standing at the entrance of the Hall of Merit was called the Sword Without Trace. He was 18 years old this year, and was a loose cultivator who had entered the 100 Chi Gate through the sex selection competition 3 years ago. To be able to enter the challenge competition as a loose cultivator and eventually enter the 100 Chi Gate, a second-rate sect, was enough to show that the Sword Without Trace had his own fortuitous encounters. Thus, after understanding his situation, some people in the upper echelon of the sect had nominally accepted him as a disciple. In reality, they were trying to deprive him of his fortuitous encounters. However, the Sword Without Trace was a shrewd person. Although he was still young at the time, his mind was very meticulous. Thus, he rejected all the attempts of the upper echelon of the sect to rope him in. Then, as a servant disciple, he cultivated step by step from the trial peak. In less than 2 years, his cultivation had directly broken through the martial master realm and he had been promoted to an inner disciple. However, according to the rules of the 100 Chi Gate, disciples who had been promoted to an inner disciple had to choose a peak as the target of their loyalty in the future. This also meant that even if he wanted to hide his fortuitous encounters, it would be impossible. However, the Sword Without Trace's method was both within and outside of everyone's expectations. The Sword Without Trace had chosen the weakest of the 36 peaks, second only to Clear Cloud Peak in terms of numbers. Its status and strength were ranked last, and it was not allocated any cultivation resources at all. Beastmaster Peak. Beastmaster Peak belonged to the 100 Chi Gates faction in name only. This was because the mountain range where the 100 Chi Gate was located was under the rule of strange beasts. It was only because of an agreement between the upper echelons that the 100 Chi Gate was given the opportunity to establish a sect. However, if they enslaved strange beasts in the area ruled by strange beasts, wouldn't that be provoking the strange beast emperor in the depths of the mountain range? Chapter 101. 100 Chi Gate, in front of the Hall of Merit. However, to everyone's surprise, even at Beastmaster Peak, the Sword Without Trace did not stay for too long. Normally, he would either go out to train or exchange for cultivation resources at the Hall of Merit. It was under this cautious and risky method of survival that the Sword Without Trace not only managed to protect his own fortune, but also made successive breakthroughs in the short span of a year. He was now at the peak of 6th grade martial master. Unlike how the people of the sect viewed the Sword Without Trace, Yu Haoran knew that the Sword Without Trace not only cultivated quickly, his potential was high, his swordsmanship was exquisite, and he was also a person who valued relationships and loyalty. In his previous life, when the 100 Chi Gate was in danger of being exterminated, the elites and core disciples who enjoyed the protection of the sect immediately chose to flee the sect. However, the Sword Without Trace did not leave. With the cultivation of a peak 7th grade martial king, he single-handedly fought against 9 experts of the high-level martial king realm. Not only did he protect some of the inner sect disciples of the martial master realm and successfully evacuate from the 100 Feet Gate, he also easily killed 9 experts of the martial king realm. Afterwards, he was attacked by an early-stage martial king expert. Not only did he heavily injure the expert, he also calmly left. Unfortunately, ever since the 100 Chi Gate was exterminated, Yu Haoran had not seen or heard any news about the Sword Without Trace. The Sword Without Trace, with your mere 6th grade martial master cultivation, How could you have killed a 7th grade exotic beast? Moreover, it was the king of 7th grade exotic beasts, the green-eyed wolf king. Furthermore, yesterday, Marshal Uncle Lai Ching went deep into the mountain range and heavily injured a 7th grade 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king. However, he was warned by the Emperor of Exotic Beasts in the depths of the mountain range and had no choice but to retreat. Therefore, I suspect that this green-eyed wolf king's corpse was actually killed by Marshal Uncle Lai Ching. You just took advantage of it. According to the rules of the sect and the Hall of Merit, we can only give you 37th grade 9th grade spirit stones in exchange. Just as Yu Haoran was recalling the various experiences of the sword without trace in his previous life, a contemptuous reprimand came from the Achievement Hall. The disdainful rebuke from the Achievement Hall immediately caused the surrounding people to discuss. That's right, a 7th step 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king is comparable to a peak 6th grade martial king. With the sword without trace's 6th grade martial master cultivation, not to mention injuring the green-eyed wolf king, I'm afraid he doesn't even have the courage to face it. It seems that the Achievement Palace senior brother did not wrongly accuse the sword without trace. I didn't expect that the sword without trace, who seemed to be honest and upright, was actually an opportunistic and treacherous man. Although everyone had deliberately lowered their voices, with the sword without trace's strength, how could he not hear them? Although he maintained a calm expression in the face of everyone's criticism, flames continuously flashed in his eyes. His left hand tightly gripping the hilt of his sword showed that he did not care about the crowd's discussion. However, his solitary nature made him not good with words. Faced with the Achievement Hall's slander, he really did not know how to refute. Wu Jingjun was also very familiar with the scene that was unfolding in front of the Achievement Hall. In the Wu clan, he had suffered many such slander. Furthermore, he should not be deluded to think that there would be someone who would speak up for him. This was because it was already very rare for the crowd to not take advantage of the situation to add insult to injury. Did he expect them to help him out? However, just as he thought that the sword without trace would be like him and turn around to leave, Yu Haoran suddenly walked towards the Achievement Hall. He could not help but ask, "Yu Shixiang, what do you want?" "Nothing, I just want to say a few words," Yu Haoran said calmly. Others might not believe that the sword without trace was able to kill the 7th level 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king, but Yu Haoran believed it. Furthermore, Yu Haoran also believed that when his cultivation reached the peak of 6th grade martial master, he would be able to kill a 7th level 3rd grade beast king even more easily than the sword without trace. Yu Haoran's sudden appearance might seem foolish to others, but Wu Jingjun was very touched. Since Yu Haoran was willing to stand up for a stranger who had been wronged, he would definitely not mistreat Wu Jingjun, who had chosen to follow him from the start. Thinking of this, Wu Jingjun quickened his steps to catch up to Zhang Che. Yu Haoran's sudden appearance immediately attracted the attention of the crowd, especially the disciples standing at the entrance of the Achievement Hall. They looked at Yu Haoran with doubtful expressions. The spectating disciples might not recognize Yu Haoran, but the Achievement Hall disciples in charge of distributing the benefits to the disciples recognized Yu Haoran. After the inner disciple ranking competition ended, Vice Sect Leader Lai Yan had sent 3 pictures to the Achievement Hall. One was the double champion Yu Haoran, the second was the peerless beauty Lin Mengyao, and the third was the black-cloved youth. Moreover, he had specifically warned them not to offend these 3 people. Ignoring the attention of the crowd, Yu Haoran walked to the entrance of the Achievement Hall and did not speak up for the sword without trace. Instead, he lowered his head to observe the corpse of the green-eyed wolf king. After observing the corpse of the green-eyed wolf king, Yu Haoran further confirmed that the green-eyed wolf king had indeed died at the hands of the sword without trace. However, the reason why the sword without trace was able to kill the green-eyed wolf king was not only because he had the ability to challenge those of a higher rank, but also because the green-eyed wolf king was a female wolf. Moreover, it had just given birth to a pup, so its rank had temporarily dropped to the 9th rank of the 8th step. Otherwise, with the sword without trace's strength, it would have been very difficult for him to kill the green-eyed Wolf King, which had reached the 3rd rank of the 7th step, despite the gap of 6 small ranks. After observing the corpse of the green-eyed Wolf King, Yuhauran raised his head to look at the Achievement Hall disciple who had just slandered the sword without trace. Then, he turned his head to look at the sword without trace. Finally, he pointed at the sword without trace and said, "This green-eyed Wolf King should have been personally killed by the senior." "What? The sword without trace can kill a green-eyed Wolf King of the 7th step, 3rd rank? I'm going to vomit blood. Who is this brat? How can he say that the green-eyed Wolf King was killed by the sword without trace? That's right. I can also say that I was the one who killed the green-eyed Wolf King. That's right. Who does he think he is? He's the gate master of the 100 Chi Gate." After Yuhauran confirmed that the green-eyed Wolf King was indeed killed by the sword without trace, the Achievement Hall disciple did not say anything. Instead, the crowd began to discuss among themselves. Moreover, there were many people who did not like the sword without trace and Yuhauran who were in the limelight. They could not help but mock and humiliate Yuhauran. Coldly looking at those who mocked and humiliated him, Yuhauran roared, "All of you, shut up!" Then, he turned to the sword without trace and asked, "Senior, in your current state, I wonder if you can still use your most powerful sword technique? Not only have I used up a lot of my elemental energy, but my internal organs have also been severely injured. I can barely use the sword technique, but I don't have the power of a sword technique." Asking someone to use their most powerful sword technique was actually a taboo. However, the sword without trace did not know why, but he seemed to trust the young man who asked him to use his most powerful sword technique. Therefore, he answered honestly. Chapter 102. 100 Chi Gate in front of the Hall of Merit. They were only going to use the sword without trace's sword moves to examine the wounds on the green-eyed Wolf King's body. It didn't matter if the moves were powerful or not. After getting Yuhauran's permission, the sword without trace endured the pain in his organs and reluctantly performed the set of sword moves that he had been practicing for a long time. "Yuhauran, I didn't expect the sword without trace to be so lucky. He actually obtained the monster-slaying sword art that was created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor." When the sword without trace performed the sword moves, the Thaling and the victor couldn't help but praise him and point out the specific origin of the sword moves. The Amethyst Sword Emperor. Hearing Thaling mention the Amethyst Sword Emperor, Yuhauran vaguely remembered that he had heard this name before. Apart from the emperors of the 3 great empires, the only person who could be called an emperor was Emperor Wu. When the sword moves that the sword without trace performed formed a sword seal of the amethyst flower, a memory suddenly came to his mind. It was when he had risked his life to enter the demon god's ancient tomb. In one of the tombs outside the tomb, he had seen a peerless woman that he had never seen before. The peerless woman with a long sword seemed to be called the Amethyst Sword Emperor. At that time, there was a relief carved on the wall of the tomb. The relief was the monster-slaying sword art. However, the monster-slaying sword art that was created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor was only suitable for women. Therefore, he had only taken a few glances at it before withdrawing. This was also the main reason why he couldn't remember it at first. Thaling, as far as I know, the Amethyst Sword Emperor's sword moves are only suitable for women. How could the sword without trace, a man, be able to practice this set of sword moves? Moreover, he has already mastered the essence of the sword moves, Yuhauran asked in confusion. There are 2 reasons. The first reason is that this guy's sword moves were created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor when he was at the peak of the Martial King realm. It only has 20% of the power of the complete monster-slaying sword art. The second reason is that there is something wrong with this guy. As for what the problem is, you can guess it yourself. When Thaling explained the first reason, Yuhauran's voice, his tone was quite serious. But when he mentioned the second reason, there was a hint of ridicule in his voice, which made Yuhauran extremely puzzled. Although Yuhauran wanted to see how Jian Wuhan had grasped the essence of the sword art, due to the limitations of his yuan qi and injuries, he only executed it halfway before stopping. This made it impossible for Yuhauran to know the reason why he had grasped the essence of the sword art. Nodding at Jian Wuhan, Yuhauran turned to the Hall of Merit disciples and asked, "Did you see it clearly?" Shaking his head, the Hall of Merit disciple replied politely, "I don't understand." Yuhauran was speechless at the Hall of Merit disciple's reply. He could only point at the corpse of the green-eyed wolf king. "Is the sword moves that the sword without trace used the same as the sword wounds on the green-eyed wolf king's fatal wounds?" "They are indeed very similar." After careful observation, the Hall of Merit disciple nodded in agreement. "It's not just similar, it's exactly the same. This also proves that this green-eyed wolf king was indeed killed by Senior the sword without trace," Yuhauran pointed out with a look of disappointment. "Yuhauran, although the sword wounds on the green-eyed wolf king are similar to the sword without trace's sword moves, this does not prove that the green-eyed wolf king was killed by the sword without trace." Faced with irrefutable evidence, the Hall of Merit disciple stubbornly refuted. Furthermore, the sword without trace is only a 6th grade martial master. How could he have killed the green-eyed wolf king that was comparable to a 6th grade martial king? At this moment, Yuhauran had already understood. It wasn't that the Hall of Merit disciple didn't believe that the green-eyed wolf king was killed by the sword without trace. He probably wanted to take the green-eyed wolf king for himself. Or perhaps he wanted to take all the resources that the green-eyed wolf king could exchange for. Although he wasn't afraid of the Hall of Merit, his cultivation was still too low. For the time being, he couldn't afford to have too much conflict with the Hall of Merit. Furthermore, in the near future, he still needed to exchange for some medicine and resources from the Hall of Merit. He didn't want to offend these people from the Hall of Merit, so he could only take out more solid evidence. Therefore, Yuhauran directly squatted down and lifted up the green-eyed wolf king's hind leg. He pointed at the wolf king's private area and said, "See for yourself." At that time, when the sword without trace had killed the green-eyed wolf king, he had directly injured the green-eyed wolf king's buttocks a few times. This caused the Hall of Merit disciples to not look at this area when they examined the green-eyed wolf king's corpse. Therefore, they didn't know the true secret of how the green-eyed wolf king was killed. However, what Yuhauran didn't notice was that when he lifted up the green-eyed wolf king's hind leg, the sword without trace, who had been staring at him, actually lowered his head in embarrassment. After careful observation, the Hall of Merit disciple's face first revealed a shocked expression. Then, his shock turned into excitement. After that, he directly stood up and went straight into the Hall of Merit. "Senior Brother Sword, don't worry. The Hall of Merit will give you the resources you deserve." Seeing the Hall of Merit disciple hastily leave, Yuhauran knew what he was going to do. He also knew that the Hall of Merit disciple wouldn't make things difficult for the sword without trace in order to shut his mouth. "Since you're called Yuhauran, you must be the double champion of the new disciples this time. You must be a peerless genius who has the potential to become a martial saint," the sword without trace said with a gentle expression as he picked up a few strands of hair that had fallen in front of his forehead. "That's right. I am Yuhauran, a new disciple who has just entered the Hall of Merit. However, I'm afraid only the heavens know if I can become a martial saint." While replying to the sword without trace's question, Yuhauran had a strange feeling in his heart. At first, Yuhauran couldn't clearly see the sword without trace's appearance because of the strands of hair that had fallen in front of his forehead. Now that the sword without trace had taken off his hair, Yuhauran discovered that his appearance was too gentle. There wasn't a trace of masculinity that a man should have. If it wasn't for the Adam's apple that was faintly protruding from his neck, Yu Haoran would have even suspected that he was a woman. Junior brother Yu, thank you for helping me out. The sword without trace expressed his gratitude as he formed a sword flower with one hand. As the vicious sword emperor in his previous life, how could Yu Haoran not know that using a sword flower to express gratitude was the highest form of etiquette for a swordsman? Therefore, he formed a sword flower with his fingers and returned the gesture. Senior brother sword, you're welcome. Just as Yu Haoran and the sword without trace were returning the gesture, the disciple who had just rushed into the Hall of Merit returned to the entrance with a smile on his face. Yu Haoran, many thanks. After first expressing his gratitude to Yu Haoran, the Hall of Merit disciple casually tossed a package to the sword without trace. Inside this package are 100 9th grade 9th level spirit stones, 10 8th grade 1st level spirit nurturing pills, 3 8th grade 1st level spirit gathering pills, and 3 500 years old purple shadow grass. It's enough to exchange for the corpse of the green-eyed wolf king. Although the Hall of Merit disciple's introduction was very detailed, the sword without trace, who had been fooled countless times, didn't believe him at all. In front of the Hall of Merit disciple, he directly opened the package and carefully counted the items inside. The sword without trace's actions caused the originally smiling Hall of Merit disciple's expression to immediately turn gloomy. Even Yu Haoran, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but shake his head. Chapter 103. 100 Qi Gate, in front of the Achievement Hall. In order to ease the tense atmosphere, Yu Haoran took the initiative to stand in front of the Achievement Hall disciple, blocking the sword without trace who was counting the resources. Then, he smiled and said, Senior brother, Junior brother Wu and I have come this time in hopes of using the sect's secret realm to further temper our bodies. Junior brother Yu and Junior brother Wu have broken through to the martial warrior realm. Hearing that Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun wanted to use the secret realm to further temper their bodies, the Achievement Hall disciples' first reaction was that Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun had actually broken through to the martial warrior realm in such a short amount of time. However, after thinking about it, with Yu Haoran's talent and potential, and with Wu Jingjuan's special body constitution, it was normal for them to break through to the martial warrior realm so quickly. Therefore, after regaining his composure, he directly called for an outer disciple and ordered him to bring Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun to the secret realm. Senior brother Jian, we'll meet again someday. Turning around to greet the sword without trace, Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun were led by the Achievement Hall's outer disciple to the east side of the Achievement Hall. Seeing Yu Haoran turn around and leave, the sword without trace's cold face revealed a trace of complex gentleness. However, when his gaze fell upon the Achievement Hall's outer disciple, the gentleness instantly turned into coldness. Then, he turned around and left the Achievement Hall. The secret realm that could be used to temper the body was located in a cave on the east side of the Achievement Hall. Under the guidance of the Achievement Hall's outer disciple, Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun quickly arrived in front of the cave. At this moment, there were more than 10 disciples standing in front of the cave, preparing to use the secret realm. 2 of them were familiar faces to both Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun. One of them was Meng Fanwei, who was once forced by him to challenge a 9th grade martial disciple. The other person was the black-clothed youth, who was unwilling to admit defeat. He had an unusually arrogant expression and would bring disaster to the 100 Qi Gate in the future. Should I call you Junior Martial Brother Yu or Yu Shixiang? Although Yu Haoran had forced Meng Fanwei to place 23rd in the ranking competition, Meng Fanwei did not resent Yu Haoran at all. Not to mention the talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance Yu Haoran had displayed, as well as the strength to challenge those of a higher realm, made him realize that Yu Haoran had a boundless future. Befriending him would only be beneficial to him. Therefore, when he saw Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun, he greeted them enthusiastically. High 2nd grade martial warrior. After announcing his cultivation, Yu Haoran looked at Meng Fanwei. Meng Fanwei greets you Shixiang. Meng Fanwei greeted with a bitter smile. Although he knew that Yu Haoran's talent was outstanding and that the martial warrior realm wouldn't take up too much of his time, he didn't expect that in just 3 days, Yu Haoran would not only successfully break through to the martial warrior realm, but also directly advance to the high second-grade martial warrior. In terms of cultivation, Yu Haoran had already surpassed him. With regards to Yu Haoran's progress, he felt powerless. At the same time, he also gave up on the idea of challenging Yu Haoran in the future. As for the black-clothed youth standing in front of Meng Fanwei, after hearing Yu Haoran announce his cultivation, he couldn't help but frown. However, his frown quickly smoothed out and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. Yu Haoran wasn't the kind of person who liked to stick a warm face to a cold butt. Since the black-clothed youth didn't take the initiative to greet him, he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. Therefore, he chatted with Meng Fanwei while waiting for the secret realm to open. The 100 Qi Gate had a secret realm that tempered the body. Although it could only be used for martial warriors, it could allow 20 people to use it at the same time. This could be considered as a compensation for having a disadvantage and a benefit. While waiting for the secret realm to reopen, he chatted with Meng Fanwei. As they chatted, Meng Fanwei suddenly mentioned the Blue Moon secret realm that would open in a month. The Blue Moon secret realm was a natural secret realm that was jointly developed by the 100 Qi Gate, Heart Moon Sect, Meteor Sect and Ancient Town Sect. The so-called natural secret realm was an independent space formed by the fusion of the law of space and different law of space. Natural secret realms were of different sizes. The small secret realms might only be the size of a grain of rice. The large secret realms might even be larger than the entire Tianxian continent. According to what Yu Haoran knew, the demon god's ancient tomb was very likely to be a natural secret realm. It was a mysterious secret realm that might be larger than the Tianxian continent. The Blue Moon secret realm was located in a valley 700 miles away from the 100 Qi Gate. It was an unopened secret realm that was accidentally discovered by a few disciples of the Heart Moon sect during their training. Because the Heart Moon sect was only a third-rate sect, it was difficult for them to break the secret realm's restriction with their sect's strength. Therefore, the Heart Moon sect secretly contacted the third-rate sects, the Meteor sect and Ancient Town sect, to work together to open the secret realm. However, no one knew that the Ancient Town sect's sect master, Zhao Ji, was actually the younger cousin of the 100 Qi Gate's sect master. The reason why Zhao Ji was able to sit on the Ancient Town sect's sect master's seat with the cultivation of a peak 7th-grade martial king was entirely because of the support from the 100 Qi Gate's sect master. Zhao Ji knew the secret of the Blue Moon secret realm, which meant that the 100 Qi Gate also knew the secret of the secret realm. Therefore, after knowing that the 100 Qi Gate of the Blue Moon secret realm used their power to suppress others, not only did they directly participate in the breaking and opening of the secret realm's restriction, they also monopolized half of the secret realm's resources. The Blue Moon secret realm was only the most ordinary secret realm. Its size was equivalent to a kingdom. Moreover, due to the restriction of the secret realm's rules, the Blue Moon secret realm would only open once every 5 years. Every time it opened, only martial disciples and martial warriors could enter. If a cultivator whose cultivation surpassed the martial warrior realm entered, not only would they break the secret realm's rules and cause the entire Blue Moon secret realm to be destroyed, the intruder would also receive a backlash from the secret realm's rules and their soul would be destroyed. Therefore, the opening of the Blue Moon secret realm was not only a battle for cultivation resources, but also a trial for the disciples. It was also a cruel elimination competition. In his previous life, Yu Haoran had entered the Blue Moon secret realm once. However, because he was only a 4th-grade martial disciple at that time, he was the disciple with the lowest cultivation that entered the secret realm. Therefore, He could only move around the outer area of the secret realm, and had very little harvest. However, this time was different from his previous life, because not only was his cultivation at the peak of the second-grade martial warrior, his strength had also reached the early stage of the fifth-grade martial warrior. He had the strength and ability to fight for any treasure within the Blue Moon's secret realm. Moreover, Yu Haoran knew that after the Blue Moon's secret realm opened this time, there would be 3 treasures that even peak martial king experts would be moved by. Moreover, 2 of the 3 treasures would fall into the hands of his enemies from his previous life. Therefore, when the Blue Moon's secret realm opened this time, not only would he seize all the precious treasures within the secret realm, he would also use the secret realm's special rules to eliminate his enemies that would threaten him in the future. Just as Yu Haoran was recalling all the information about the Blue Moon's secret realm, the secret realm that had been in an open state suddenly flashed with a white light. Immediately after, a disciple at the peak of the third-grade martial warrior crawled out of the cave in a sorry state. Sigh. Patting the dust off his clothes, the disciple who was thrown out of the secret realm sighed and turned to leave the cave. Chapter 104. Achievement Hall, in front of the secret realm. Yu Shixiang, what's going on? Wu Jingjun asked solemnly when he saw the disciples thrown out of the cave in a sorry state. The secret realm for tempering one's physical body uses the gravity technique unique to the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts. It uses the pressure of gravity to further stimulate the potential of a martial artist's physical body. After the secret realm opens, the gravity will continue to increase until you can no longer stand, sit, or even crawl. Then, you will be thrown out of the secret realm. The reason why they appeared in such a sorry state was because they couldn't withstand the increasing pressure of gravity. Yu Haoran reminded the 5th disciple who was crawling out of the cave. The blood essence emitted from his body was far stronger than the previous 4 disciples. Jingjun, the longer you can withstand the pressure of gravity, the more your physical body's potential will be stimulated, and the stronger the tempering effect will be. If you can withstand the strongest 10 times gravity in the secret realm, then your physical body will at least improve by a grade. Moreover, when you are thrown out of the cave, you won't be in such a sorry state like the others. Just as Yu Haoran was explaining the various effects of the secret realm to Wu Jingjun, more than 10 disciples were thrown out of the cave one after another. After careful calculation, the 20 disciples who had entered the secret realm had all been thrown out of the secret realm. At this moment, the Achievement Hall disciple in charge of managing the secret realm spoke. According to the sect's rules, other than the new disciples who can use the secret realm once for free, the other disciples who want to use the secret realm only need to pay 5 sect contribution points and 3 9th-level first-grade spirit stones if they want to provide the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts. If they want the sect to provide the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts, then they need to pay 10 sect contribution points and 5 9th-level first-grade spirit stones. Among the 20 disciples who wanted to enter the secret realm to temper their physical bodies, other than Yu Haoran, Wu Jingjun, Meng Fanwei, and the black-clothed youth, the remaining 16 disciples were not using the secret realm for the first time. Therefore, they were already prepared. They took out the token and spirit stones that represented their identity as disciples and went through the procedures to enter the secret realm. Since they were new disciples and it was their first time using the secret realm, Yu Haoran and the other 3 were at the back of the queue. When it was Yu Haoran and the other 3's turn, the Achievement Hall disciple solemnly ordered them. Zhao Xinyu, you go to the 5th room on the west side of the secret realm. The disciple of the Merit Palace instructed with a cold expression as he handed over a token with Shi Wu engraved on it to the black-clothed youth. After receiving the token, the black-clothed youth, Zhao Xinyu's face became gloomy. Of the veins on his left hand. Of his left hand token on the ground floor as he held the token. Meng Fanwei, go to the 4th room on the west side of the mystic realm. He handed Meng Fanwei a token engraved with Shi Si's name. Meng Fanwei, who didn't know that different rooms represented different effects, thanked the disciple while receiving the token. When it was Yu Haoran's turn, the originally cold and indifferent Achievement Hall disciple nodded his head with a warm expression. Yu Haoran, you go to the 1st room on the east side. Thank you, senior brother. After receiving the token from the Achievement Hall disciple, Yu Haoran expressed his gratitude with great satisfaction. In his previous life, he had used the secret realm to temper his physical body more than once. Therefore, he was very familiar with the internal structure of the secret realm. He knew that out of the 20 independent spaces formed by the secret realm's laws, 4 of them could perfectly display the power of the bear-type blood essence. He didn't expect that the Achievement Hall disciple would arrange for him to be in the best space. This way, he could better display the power of the 3 bear-type blood essences that his master had gifted him. You're welcome. The Achievement Hall disciple continued to arrange for Yu Haoran. Wu Jingjun, go to the 2nd room on the east side. As he stepped into the cave, the token in his hand emitted a warm red light. The red light enveloped Yu Haoran, and a pushing force pushed him forward. Yu Haoran didn't resist the pushing force produced by the token. He allowed the pushing force to push him forward. Soon, he arrived at an independent space. He placed the token in his hand on the light barrier of the independent space. Subsequently, the independent space split open, revealing a gap big enough for one person to pass through. Stepping into the space, Yu Haoran sized up the space in front of him. He discovered that the shape of this space wasn't much different from the other spaces. However, he was very clear that the 4 independent spaces near the core of the magic tool, not only could they perfectly display the power of the bear-type blood essence, but they could also support the gravity technique, allowing his physical body to be better tempered. Although he hadn't used the best independent space in his previous life, he had learned about this kind of magic tool that was comparable to a secret realm in the weapon refining sect. He knew how to change the blood essence. Moreover, when Feng Qingyun gave him the blood essence of the bear-type blood essence, he had given him a record of how to change the blood essence. Therefore, he quickly found the device to store the bear-type blood essence. Using a special method, he took out the ordinary bear-type blood essence given by the sect and replaced it with the thick mountain bear's blood essence given by his master. Yu Haoran stood in place, ready to welcome the activation of the magic tool. It didn't take long, only a short minute. As the device containing the bear-type blood essence completely disappeared, an aura that made one's heart tremble gradually enveloped him. Yu Haoran was very familiar with this aura. He knew that this was the gravity technique in the thick mountain bear's blood essence that had been activated in the secret realm. Therefore, he temporarily suppressed the Yuan Li in his dantian. He planned to use his physical body to resist the increasing pressure of the gravity. Double. When the aura pressed down on his body, Yu Haoran carefully sensed it and found that it was only double the original gravity of the space. To Yu Haoran, who had experienced the reckless bull fist and the star dough arts to strengthen his physical body, the pressure formed by double gravity didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Double. When the gravity in the space reached double, Yu Haoran also didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Triple. When the gravity in the space reached triple, Yu Haoran felt a little bit of pressure. However, this little bit of pressure still didn't have any effect on strengthening his physical body. Quadruple. When the gravity in the space reached quadruple, Yu Haoran finally felt a little bit of heaviness. However, this heaviness also didn't have any effect on strengthening his physical body. Quintuple. When the gravity in the space reached quintuple, Yu Haoran finally felt the power of gravity. At this moment, he couldn't straighten his body like before. Moreover, his head began to lower slightly. Sixfold. When the gravity in the space reached sixfold, Yu Haoran began to clench his fists and the muscles on his body began to tighten. Sevenfold. When the gravity in the space reached sevenfold, not only did Yuharan's body bend slightly, but his originally straight legs also began to tremble uncontrollably. Eightfold. When the gravity in the space reached eightfold, not only did Yuharan's forehead drip with sweat like raindrops, but his breathing became heavier and heavier. Even the veins on his temples began to protrude. Ninefold. When the gravity in the space reached ninefold, Yuharan directly bent his knees and sat down cross-legged. With the strength of his physical body, it wasn't that he couldn't continue to hold on. However, the result of holding on forcefully would cause damage to his legs and internal organs. This was not in line with his original intention of using gravity to strengthen his physical body. Chapter 105. Achievement Hall in the Secret Realm. Just as Yuharan began to withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space, outside the cave, disciples began to be thrown out of the secret realm in a crawling posture. The first disciple to be thrown out of the secret realm realized that he was the first person who could not withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space in the secret realm. He immediately lowered his head in shame and turned around to leave. Not long after this disciple left, another 3 disciples were forcefully thrown out of the cave because they could not withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space in the secret realm. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm reached sixfold, 13 disciples were thrown out of the cave in succession. One of them was Meng Fanwei, who had just entered the sect. Although his posture outside the cave was a little embarrassing, it was different from the other disciples who were thrown out of the secret realm. Meng Danwei was not depressed at all. Instead, his face revealed a look of excitement. Because this was the first time he had used the secret realm to temper himself, his physical body had been greatly improved, so he had temporarily forgotten the word shame. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm reached sevenfold, Zhao Xinyu also appeared outside the cave in a crawling posture. Zhao Xinyu got up and cleaned the dust on his chest. He did not turn around and leave the secret realm like the other disciples. Instead, he stood in the same place and stared at the cave entrance as if he was waiting for someone to appear in the same way. Unfortunately, when the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm increased to eightfold, the person he was waiting for still did not appear. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm increased to eightfold and was halfway through the process, a young man in a green robe with a tyrannical aura appeared outside the cave with his hands on the ground. The appearance of the young man in green shocked the people guarding outside the cave. This was because he was the first disciple who was not thrown out of the cave with his chest on the ground. Moreover, he was able to withstand the eightfold gravity. This was enough to show how strong the young man in green's body was and how outstanding his perseverance was. Looking at Wu Jingjun, who was supporting himself with his hands on the ground, Zhao Xinyu's face instantly darkened. If his performance was not as good as Yuharan, although he was unwilling, it was not unacceptable. After all, Yuharan was stronger than him in all aspects. It was normal for him to be outstanding. However, he had lost to Wu Jingjun, who was not as good as him in terms of cultivation, strength, talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance. This was a huge blow to Zhao Sinyu's mentality. At this moment, there was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes as he looked at Wu Jingjun. Fortunately, he quickly controlled his mentality and did not let anyone notice his abnormality. Since his chest didn't touch the ground, there wasn't any dust on it. After getting up, Wu Jingjun dusted his hands and walked directly to a huge rock. Then, he sat down cross-legged and began to experience the enlightenment he had gained from using gravity to temper his body in the independent space of the secret realm. When the gravity in the independent space reached the limit of 9 times, Yuharan felt that his body was close to the limit even though he was sitting cross-legged to resist the pressure. There were 2 ways to get out of this predicament. The first way was to mobilize the yuan power in his dantian and use the yuan power in conjunction with the body to resist the huge pressure formed by the gravity. This was the method used by most disciples who used the secret space to temper their bodies. However, there was a disadvantage to using this method. It would weaken the pressure of the gravity on the body and could not achieve the most perfect tempering effect. Therefore, Yuharan would not consider using this method for the time being. The second method, on the other hand, was to continuously stimulate the body's potential and increase the strength of the body to resist the increasing gravity. However, this method also had a disadvantage. If the body could not withstand the pressure of the gravity, it would cause serious injuries to the body. Of course, there were advantages to this method. Although there was a possibility of serious injuries, if the speed at which the potential was stimulated could resist the pressure of the gravity, then the body would be perfectly tempered. This was the method Yuharan chose. At the same time, he relied on his astonishing willpower to endure the intense pain caused by the gravity pressing down on his body. On the other hand, he used the pressure of the gravity to stimulate the potential of his body and increase the strength of his body. Under this pressure, stimulation, and increase in strength, his body, which had just reached the middle stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, quickly broke through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior. Just as his body broke through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, the pressure that was originally close to the limit relaxed a lot. However, this relaxed feeling did not last for long. As the gravity in the independent space increased by 10 times, a heavenly pressure acted on Yuharan's body, causing him to almost fall down. If he did not use his arms to support himself, he would have been thrown out of the cave like the other disciples who were thrown out of their magic tools. 10 times the gravity. His body, which had just broken through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, was already unable to withstand such a terrifying pressure. At this moment, Yuharan not only found it difficult to breathe, but his entire body could not help but tremble under the pressure of the gravity. Yuharan knew that 10 times the gravity of the independent space had already reached the limit of what he could endure. Now, he had two choices. Either he could leave the independent space with his hands on the ground and end this tempering of his body, or he could continue to stimulate the strength of his body in this life and death situation, forcing himself to continue increasing the grade of his body. Yuharan didn't think too much about the second choice. He resisted the pressure of gravity on his body and straightened his body bit by bit. He planned to continue using his cross-legged posture to resist the pressure of gravity. Just as Yuharan was about to go all out to resist the pressure of 10 times the gravity, outside the cave, there were not only the disciples of the Achievement Hall, but also Meng Fanwei, Zhao Xinyu, Wu Jingjun, and the others. At this moment, there were several hundred people gathered outside the cave. Among them, there were disciples who wanted to use the secret realm to temper their bodies, as well as inner disciples and elite disciples who had come to the Achievement Hall to exchange resources and complete missions. When these people found out that there was someone who could withstand the pressure of 9 times the normal pressure in the secret realm, they all put down whatever they were doing and rushed to the secret realm. They wanted to see who this genius, who could withstand the pressure of 9 times the normal pressure was. If it was a genius from an ordinary sect, then they would inform the higher-ups of their sect to make promises and rope him in. If it was a genius from the strongest sect, then they would warn their fellow disciples not to provoke him in the future. This was because ever since the 100 Qi Gate obtained a secret realm that could temper the body, no less than several 100,000 people had used it. Chapter 106. Achievement Hall, in front of the secret territory. In the 100 Qi Gate, other than using the talent stone to determine a disciple's talent, potential, comprehension and perseverance, the ability to withstand the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory was also an important method to determine a disciple's status and identity. To be able to withstand 5 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could only be considered an ordinary disciple. Such a disciple had no value in nurturing, and the sect and faction would not waste too many resources on him. To be able to withstand 6 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered a disciple under investigation. Such a disciple could be paid some attention, but would not have too much hope. Similarly, they would not be given too many resources. To be able to withstand 7 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered an outstanding disciple. Such a disciple could be paid more attention and given a certain amount of care and treatment. In the future, he might be able to become a mid-level disciple of the sect. To be able to withstand 8 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered an elite disciple. Such a disciple would not only receive important attention, but would also be given a certain amount of care and treatment. Furthermore, the upper echelons of the sect would send out specialized experts to guide and inspect them from time to time. To be able to withstand 9 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered a core disciple. Such a disciple would not only receive important attention, but would also be given a certain amount of care and treatment. Furthermore, he would be able to choose a different faction freely. At the same time, the faction he chose would not have the right to reject him. Of course, no faction would be willing to reject such a genius disciple. As for the 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, ever since the 100 Chi Gate had obtained the secret territory and officially used it, no one had been able to withstand 9 times the gravity, let alone 10 times the gravity. As a result, the ancestors of the 100 Chi Gate had never considered how a disciple who could withstand 10 times the gravity should be taken care of, nurtured, and valued. It was only at the end of the rules regarding the training of the secret territory that there was a reward for clearing the secret territory. Therefore, when they saw that Yuhauran was still not expelled from the independent space of the secret territory, even though the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory had increased by 10 times, how could the crowd not be shocked? This 9th junior brother is too ferocious. Huang Zonghua and Pan Yuhai, who had just consolidated their cultivation of martial ancestor, wanted to try their luck at the Achievement Hall. They wanted to see if they could receive a mission that was suitable for their cultivation and had a good reward. When they heard that Yuhauran and Wu Jingjun had used the secret territory to temper their bodies and that Yuhauran had already reached 9 times the gravity of the gravity, the two of them hurriedly came to spectate. Huang Zhan sect's disciple, Huang Zhan of martial ancestors' disciple, of the marshal of heavens of the secret territory of the secret territory. One must know that when he was a martial warrior, he entered the hidden realm 3 times to temper his body. The last time was when he entered the hidden realm as a peak 6th grade martial warrior. However, he was only able to endure up to 8 times the normal gravity before he was forced to retreat. Today, Yuhauran was actually able to endure 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory just by relying on his cultivation of the martial warrior realm. How could he not be shocked by Yuhauran's perseverance and the strength of his body? Actually, what Huang Zonghua didn't know was that when he had endured the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, he had only used the blood essence of a 9th level first rank, the most common of bear-type exotic beast. Yuhauran, on the other hand, had used the blood essence of a 9th level 9th rank exotic beast, the king of the thick mountain bear. The difference between the two types of blood essences was at least several times stronger. Furthermore, Yuhauran had not used a single trace of Yuan Li all the way to 10 times the gravity. He had been relying on his strong body to resist the pressure of the gravity. If he knew about this, shock wouldn't be enough to describe his current feelings. Looking at the silent cave and hearing the discussions of the crowd, Zhao Sinyu's face was so gloomy that it seemed as if it could drip water. He never would have thought that not only was Yu Haoran's perseverance astonishing, but his body was also so strong that he could actually endure 10 times the gravity. Based on the strength of his body and his cultivation of an advanced 2nd grade martial warrior, perhaps even a peak 4th grade martial warrior or early 5th grade martial warrior might not be his match. Thinking of this, Zhao Sinyu didn't feel despair. Instead, he felt a sense of crisis. A crisis that could affect whether or not he could smoothly become the gate master of the 100 Qi Gate in the future. Therefore, under the pressure of this crisis, Zhao Sinyu also developed a strong killing intent towards Yu Haoran. This time, he didn't adjust his mentality very well. The killing intent lasted for 3 seconds. Wu Jingjun, who had activated his bloodthirsty physique, was especially sensitive to killing intent. Moreover, he was very close to Zhao Sinyu. Therefore, he could clearly feel the strong killing intent emitted from Zhao Sinyu's body. The reason why Zhao Sinyu's killing intent was obvious. It must be because of Yu Haoran's outstanding performance in the secret realm. Thinking that Zhao Sinyu actually wanted to kill Yu Haoran, Wu Jingjuan's originally clear eyes flashed with a frightening red light. In the secret realm, in an independent space, under the pressure of 10 times the gravity, Yu Haoran was almost pressed down. Right now, he was only using his arms to support himself, barely resisting the terrifying pressure of 10 times the gravity. The tempering of his mental state in his previous life allowed him to quickly break free from the pressure of 10 times the gravity. As he continued to stimulate the potential of his body, he used his tenacious perseverance to slowly straighten his body. Yu Haoran's actions seemed to have angered the consciousness of the secret realm. Originally, it was only 10 times the gravity of the entire space, but in an instant it gathered on Yu Haoran's body. This caused his half-straightened body to collapse once again. Furthermore, this collapse caused his arms to twist and his chest to almost touch the ground. This also meant that he was beginning to suffer the backlash of the gravity. The pain caused by the twisting of his arms was similar to the pain caused by the pressure of gravity on his body. Therefore, Yu Haoran's consciousness was not affected by the twisting of his arms. Feeling the pressure of the entire space on his body, Yu Haoran knew that with the strength of his body, it would be difficult for him to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. At the same time, he finally understood why among the many disciples in the sect who used the secret realm, no one was able to persevere to the end, even if they were exceptional geniuses. Perhaps it was directly related to the final pressure of the independent space. If he continued to persevere, not only would his body not be strengthened, he would also suffer serious injuries. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to mobilize the elemental energy in his energy center and combine it with the strength of his body to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. However, just as Yu Haoran was about to mobilize the elemental energy in his energy center, a surge of energy suddenly emerged from his blood. The surging energy quickly merged with his bones, causing his twisted arms to instantly return to their original state. It took less than 1/5 of the energy to heal his twisted arms. The remaining energy continued to merge into his meridians, organs, and body. The remaining energy finally converged into his dantian. After receiving the support of this powerful energy, Yu Haoran immediately felt the strength of his body break through from the late stage of a 5th grade martial warrior to the early stage of a 6th grade martial warrior. At the same time, the late stage of a 2nd grade martial warrior also broke through to the early stage of a 3rd grade martial warrior under the dual effects of the energy and pressure. More importantly, the breakthrough in his cultivation stimulated his body. His body, which had just broken through to the early stage of a 6th grade martial warrior, instantly rose to the middle stage of a 6th grade martial warrior. The body of a middle stage of a 6th grade martial warrior was able to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. Chapter 107. Achievement Hall, Secret Territory. Thaling, the energy that appeared in my blood, could it be the earth ginseng I consumed yesterday? Yuharan asked. Since his rebirth, the only heavenly treasures he had consumed were the blood ginseng and the earth ginseng. Considering that the blood ginseng targeted Yuan Li and the earth ginseng targeted the body, he guessed that the energy came from the earth ginseng. That's right, it is the energy of the earth ginseng in your blood that hasn't been completely refined. Thaling's answer confirmed Yuharan's guess. Actually, if you didn't use the 10 times gravity artifact to pressure your body, causing your body to reach its limit, you wouldn't have been able to activate the residual energy of the earth ginseng in your blood. Moreover, when you broke through to the martial master realm, the residual energy of the earth ginseng would be expelled from your body along with the impurities produced during the breakthrough. However, what I didn't expect was that not only was your willpower outstanding, but your courage was also astonishing. You actually dared to force yourself into a desperate situation during a mere tempering of your body. Now, not only has your body reached the middle of the 6th grade martial warrior, but your cultivation is only at the early 3rd grade martial warrior. There is a difference of 3 grades between your body and your cultivation. Yuharan, I am now very much looking forward to seeing if you can break through the 10th grade martial warrior realm like the martial disciple realm when your cultivation reaches the peak of the 9th grade martial warrior realm. In response to Thaling's exclamation, Yuharan's heart was as calm as still water. In his previous life, in order to increase his strength, he risked his life 5 to 6 times out of 10. He was already used to forcing himself into desperate situations and was also used to maintaining a clear mind in desperate situations. The desperate situation that Thaling mentioned just now, in his opinion, was just a very normal cultivation in his previous life. It couldn't be considered a desperate situation at all. Perhaps it sensed Yuharan's breakthrough. Perhaps it also knew that the 10 times gravity could no longer threaten Yuharan, so the 10 times gravity on Yuharan's body gradually weakened until it finally disappeared. Looking at the switch to place the blood essence, Yuharan pondered for a long time. In the end, he gave up on the idea of replacing the blood essence of the black flame bear. It wasn't that he didn't want to use the blood essence of the rank 8 3rd grade black flame bear to increase the grade of his body, but the opening of the body-tempering mystic realm required a disciple of the Merit Hall to personally open it. He would need to go outside to complete the procedures. As a disciple of the 100 Chi Gate in his previous life, he knew what it meant to withstand different times of gravity. He was also very clear about the commotion caused by enduring 10 times the gravity. Presumably, he had already attracted the attention of some people outside. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he could only temporarily give up on the plan to continue tempering his body. Yuharan tidied up his clothes, which were a little messy due to the sudden arrival of the 10 times gravity. He reached out and picked up the token with the word Dong-E engraved on it. He stuck the token on the space wall and then left the mystic realm through the gap created by the token. Although he knew that he had withstood 10 times the gravity and would attract the attention of some people, he didn't expect that there would be so many people gathered outside the mystic realm. This gave Yuharan, who had just walked out of the cave, a fright. Fortunately, he had experienced many big scenes in his previous life. In the face of hundreds of onlookers, he quickly adjusted his state of mind. He handed the token in his hand to the Merit Hall disciple who was still in a daze. He then gave Wu Jingjun a look. Then, he immediately used the Gale Steps and left the secret realm and the Hall of Merit before anyone could react. 6 Junior brother, let's go back to Qinyan Peak first. Huang Zonghua didn't react until Yuharan disappeared in front of the mystic realm. When he thought about how Yuharan had not only withstood 10 times the gravity in the mystic realm but also walked out of the mystic realm unscathed, Huang Zonghua suddenly thought of a rule in the sect. It was a reward for passing a mystic realm that trained one's physical body. Therefore, He didn't have time to go to the Merit Hall to find a suitable mission for himself. He wanted to immediately inform eldest senior brother, and then discuss whether to receive the reward for passing the mystic realm. Okay. Although Pan Yuhai didn't immediately think of the reward for passing the mystic realm like Huang Zonghua, he was also shocked and didn't have the heart to check the mission. Therefore, he subconsciously agreed to Huang Zonghua's suggestion. Although there weren't many people who thought of the reward for passing the mystic realm like Huang Zonghua, there was still a portion of them. When this portion of people thought of the huge amount of rewards, their eyes suddenly surged with uncontrollable greed. A portion of people who knew that the person who had just passed the mystic realm was Yu Haoran quietly left the mystic realm and waited quietly in some hidden corners leading to the Merit Hall. The portion of people who didn't know who Yu Haoran was hurriedly asked the disciples of the Merit Hall. When they found out about Yu Haoran's background, they also waited quietly like the people who had been waiting in the hidden corners earlier. Yu Shixiang, how strong is the pressure of 10 times the gravity? How effective is the tempering of the body? After leaving the Merit Hall, Yu Haoran waited for a while at the foot of a mountain until Wu Xingjun arrived. He then used Wind Walk to bring him back to Qingyun Peak. Wu Xingjun, who was being brought along, asked with a hint of envy in his voice. "Xingjun, my situation is different from yours." Yu Haoran knew what Wu Xingjun meant. He wanted to determine the limit of his endurance when he entered the mystic realm based on his description of the power of 10 times the gravity. However, considering that the blood essence he was using was different from the blood essence provided by the sect, the pressure in the mystic realm was also different. In order to prevent Wu Xingjun from making a mistake and hurting himself, Yu Haoran told him the truth. "Yu Shixiang, I only have one word to describe you: admiration." When Wu Xingjun heard that Yu Haoran had used the blood essence of a bear-type exotic beast, which he had specially prepared beforehand, and that the gravity created by the independent space of the secret realm was several times stronger than the gravity he had withstood earlier, he only had one word in his heart: admiration. "Zhengjun, when we go back today, you should go into seclusion to comprehend and see if you can increase your cultivation with the help of the Origin Nurturing Pill. Tomorrow morning, I will find you and bring you to the depths of the mountain range to train." Right now, his cultivation was already at the early 3rd grade martial warrior and his body was at the mid 6th grade martial warrior. It would be difficult for him to continue increasing his cultivation and body grade in a short period of time. Otherwise, it would cause his foundation to waver. Therefore, he wanted to go to the depths of the mountain range immediately and rely on the battles with the exotic beasts to completely consolidate his cultivation after his breakthrough. After that, he would think of a way to continue improving his cultivation and the grade of his body. "I understand." After replying, Wu Xingjun became silent. After sending Wu Xingjun back to the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Yu Haoran returned to his own Hidden Moon Pavilion. However, when he arrived at his courtyard, he unexpectedly saw his eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu, second senior brother Lu Guangwei, fifth senior brother Huang Zonghua, and sixth senior brother Pan Yuhai. Chapter 108, Qingyun Peak, in front of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Yu Haoran didn't need to think too much to know why his 4 senior brothers were here. When he left the fleshly body-tempering secret realm, he had seen his 5th senior brother and 6th senior brother in a daze. He knew that with his 5th senior brother's personality, he would definitely tell his eldest senior brother about his amazing performance in the secret realm. With eldest senior brother's warm personality, he would definitely come to show his concern and celebrate. "Greetings, eldest senior brother, second senior brother, 5th senior brother, 6th senior brother." Yu Haoran greeted them enthusiastically as he quickened his pace. "9th junior brother, I heard from 5th junior brother that not only did you withstand the pressure of the mystic realm's independent space, But you also walked out of the mystic realm on your own. Is that true? Chu Zhongyu asked excitedly. Senior brothers, let's talk inside. Yu Haoran smiled as he pushed open the door of the courtyard. Without going to the living room, Yu Haoran led everyone to the pavilion. He gestured for everyone to take a seat before he nodded and said to Chu Zhongyu, Fifth senior brother is right. I did withstand the pressure of the mystic realm's independent space by 10 times and walked out of the mystic realm unscathed. Ninth junior brother, do you know what kind of reward the sect gives to disciples who can withstand the pressure of 10 times the gravity and walk out of the mystic realm unscathed? After getting Yu Haoran's personal confirmation, Chu Zhongyu didn't control his excitement. Instead, he asked excitedly, although the violent fluctuations in one's emotions would affect the cultivation of one's state of mind, Yu Haoran's unexpected performance made it seem like the burden on eldest senior brother's shoulders had been lifted. Unknowingly, his temperament had undergone a qualitative change. Yu Haoran knew what this qualitative change meant. It was a sign that he was about to enter the martial king realm. Therefore, Yu Haoran was happy for eldest senior brother from the bottom of his heart. In response to Chu Zhongyu's question, Yu Haoran obviously knew about the sect's reward. However, he pretended not to know so as to give eldest senior brother a chance to relieve the pressure. According to the sect's rules, a disciple who can withstand 5 times the pressure of an independent space in a secret realm. After that, Chu Zhongyu explained in detail how the disciples were able to withstand the different gravitational forces in the independent space of the secret realm and the importance they placed on their disciples. Yu Haoran already knew about this, so he didn't show any surprise. Yu Haoran's calm reaction did not surprise Chu Zhongyu and the others. Even though Yu Haoran did not have to endure 10 times the gravity, his performance when he entered the sect had already allowed him to enjoy the best treatment among the inner sect disciples. Therefore, the promotion of his status as a disciple did not affect him much. However, Chu Zhongyu knew that Yu Haoran would definitely be interested in the reward for clearing the mystic realm. Ninth junior brother, being able to withstand 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the mystic realm and walk out of the mystic realm on your own means that you have passed the mystic realm. According to the sect's rules, you will receive a generous reward for clearing the trial. A generous reward for clearing the dungeon. Yu Haoran's eyes lit up when he heard Chu Zhongyu mention the reward. This was because he didn't know that the sect had such a rule. However, it was normal when he thought about it. In his previous life, because of his aptitude and cultivation, he either stayed at Qingyun Peak to cultivate or went to the place arranged by his master to train. He rarely heard about the gossip inside the sect. Most of the sect's secrets that he knew before were from the conversations of his senior brothers. Moreover, in his previous life, no disciple of the sect could pass the mystic realm to the same extent as him. Therefore, it was not surprising that he didn't know that the sect had a generous reward for clearing the mystic realm. That's right. Chu Zhongyu nodded and confirmed. Eldest senior brother, how are the rewards? Yu Haoran was very concerned about the number of rewards for clearing the mystic realm. After all, in order to break through to the 10th grade of martial disciple, he had already used up all of his resources. Now was the time when he urgently needed resources. Ninth junior brother, the number of rewards for clearing the mystic realm will probably surprise you. Hearing Yu Haoran increase the reward for clearing the mystic realm, Chu Zhongyu couldn't help but feel a trace of excitement when he thought about the number of rewards. Eldest senior brother, Yu Haoran, may be very ordinary in other aspects, but my state of mind is not bad. I can withstand any surprise, so please tell me in detail. Yu Haoran couldn't wait to ask. Who? Taking a deep breath, Chu Zhongyu raised his head to look at the other 3 junior brothers and began to speak. There are a total of 5 rewards for clearing the mystic realm. Speaking up to here, Chu Zhongyu raised a finger and said, the first reward is to directly obtain the identity of a core disciple, but not to enjoy the treatment of a core disciple, only the treatment of an elite disciple. Therefore, the first reward is dispensable to you. Nodding his head, Yu Haoran agreed with Chu Zhongyu's opinion. In fact, after his rebirth, he chose the 100 Qi gate again. Other than returning to his master's tutelage, what he really cared about was the treatment he could enjoy. As for the status of an inner court disciple, elite disciple, or core disciple, he didn't care much. Pointing his second finger, Chu Zhongyu continued, the second reward is 1000 10th level 10th grade spirit stones, 109th level 9th grade spirit stones, 10 8th level 9th grade spirit stones, and 3 7th level 9th grade spirit stones. Speaking of the spirit stones, Chu Zhongyu couldn't help but feel envious. One must know that as a peak 9th grade martial ancestor, the spirit stones he usually used for cultivation were 9th level 1st grade spirit stones. The reward for clearing the mystic realm was 109th level 9th grade spirit stones, not to mention the 10 8th level 9th grade spirit stones, and 3 7th level 9th grade spirit stones. In fact, not only was Chu Zhongyu envious, the other 3 senior brothers were also slightly red with a look of longing. Of course, for Yu Haoran, who could receive spirit stones as a reward, this amount of spirit stones could completely satisfy his needs in the martial warrior realm. It could even help him attempt to break through to the 10th grade martial warrior realm. If the reward for clearing the mystic realm was already so generous, then what about the remaining 2 rewards? Therefore, Yu Haoran eagerly urged, eldest senior brother, continue. Pointing his third finger, Chu Zhongyu continued, the third reward is 10 10th level 9th grade to 8th level 9th grade Qi refining pills, Qi restoring pills, Qi condensing pills, and Qi condensing pills of different grades. Speaking of the rewards, Chu Zhongtian secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva, indicating that he also desired these pills. Eldest senior brother, continue. If one wanted to express the excitement in one's heart, it would be better to listen to all the rewards in one go. Therefore, Yu Haoran forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and signaled for Chu Zhongyu to continue. This time, Chu Zhongyu didn't continue to point his finger. Instead, he said, the fourth reward is that you can use the mystic realm forever. There is no time limit and no limit to the number of times you can use it. However, you will need to provide the blood essence of a bear-type beast. Not only was Yu Haoran disappointed with the fourth reward, but even Chu Zhongyu and the others felt that it was of little value. This was because with Yu Haoran's talent, the martial warrior realm wouldn't take up too much of his time. By the time he broke through to the martial master realm and used the Yuan Li to strengthen his body, he probably wouldn't have the opportunity to use the mystic realm in the future. Chapter 109 Qingyun Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Eldest senior brother, is there a limit to the permanent use of the reward? For example, can I designate someone else to enjoy the permanent use of the reward? Disappointed, Yu Haoran wanted to use the loophole in the rules to increase the value of the fourth reward. Unfortunately, Chu Zhongyu's answer extinguished his thoughts. The permanent use of the reward is limited to the person who cleared the trial. It cannot be transferred to anyone else. Then forget it. Yu Haoran shrugged and said helplessly. The fifth reward is to enter the first 3 levels of the sect's treasury and choose any mental cultivation method or martial technique. There is no limit to the grade or type. Chu Zhongyu and the rest were satisfied with the fifth reward. However, to Yu Haoran, the fifth reward was the same as the fourth reward. They were both useless rewards. In his previous life, through excavating ruins and killing people, the mental cultivation methods and martial techniques that he collected were far superior to the most precious mental cultivation methods and martial techniques in the sect's treasury. Therefore, to Yu Haoran, this reward was still useless. Luckily, with a large amount of spiritual stones and pills as a reward, the useless fourth and fifth rewards did not destroy Yu Haoran's excitement. Junior brother Yu, When do you plan to collect the reward? The reward just now was only the sex rule. Chu Zhongyu and the rest were worried about whether they could get the reward in the end. After all, with the sex upper echelons and the Hall of Merit, they could not do anything even if they did not give out the reward in the end, let alone deducting a portion of it. Originally, Yu Haoran wanted to bring Wu Xingjun to the depths of the mountain tomorrow morning to train. However, just as Chu Zhongyu and the rest were worried, Yu Haoran was also worried that the sex upper echelons would change their minds. Therefore, he planned to go to the Hall of Merit to collect the reward before the commotion caused by clearing the secret territory died down. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran planned to get up and return to the Hall of Merit. However, before he could get up, he suddenly remembered something and stopped himself from getting up. Eldest senior brother, I'll have to trouble you to accompany me to the Achievement Hall later, Yu Haoran suggested as he lifted his head to look at Chu Zhongyu. No problem. Actually, it's not just me, the other senior brothers will also accompany you, Chu Zhongyu suggested, indicating that Yu Haoran didn't need to be so polite. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran refused. Eldest senior brother, there's no need. Then, he stood up and said to Chu Zhongyu, Eldest senior brother, please wait for a moment. I'll go out for a while. After leaving the Hidden Moon Pavilion, Yu Haoran used Gale steps to rush towards Feng Qingyun's residence. In front of the Achievement Hall. Not only did the commotion caused by Yu Haoran's passing of the secret realm not diminish in the slightest, it instead became even more sensational. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the disciples who were busy inside the Achievement Hall or the disciples who were queuing outside, everyone was talking about Yu Haoran. After all, Yu Haoran had broken a record in the 100 Qi Gate, a record that no one had been able to break for thousands of years. Just as everyone was talking about Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu led Yu Haoran, who had just left the Achievement Hall 3 hours ago, back to the Achievement Hall. Look, that's Yu Haoran, who passed the secret realm. He's also the double champion among the new disciples of the sect this time. Just as Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu stood in front of the Achievement Hall, a disciple who recognized Yu Haoran immediately exclaimed. Following that disciple's exclamation, everyone's gaze turned towards Yu Haoran. Towards this, Yu Haoran's reaction was very calm, but Chu Zhongyu felt a little nervous. This was because he had never been watched by so many people, even when he had participated in the 10-sect tournament. Ninth junior brother, let's go in. Unwilling to be watched by so many people, Chu Zhongyu suggested. There's no need for that. Yu Haoran shook his head. This was because from where he was standing, he could see the inside of the Achievement Hall. At this moment, a group of people were walking towards him from the Achievement Hall, and a few of them were people he was familiar with from his previous life. Yu Haoran, this is Hall Master Jia of our Achievement Hall. When the group of people reached the entrance of the Achievement Hall, the Achievement Hall disciple who had come in contact with Yu Haoran because of the sword without trace introduced him. Disciple Yu Haoran greets Hall Master Jia. Yu Haoran greeted him with the etiquette of a disciple. Yu Haoran was very familiar with this Hall Master Jia in front of him. This person's name was Jia Tongxi, and he was the brother-in-law of the vice sect leader Lian. He was a greedy, selfish, and treacherous person. In his previous life, when the 100 Qi Gate was besieged, he was the first batch of higher-ups to escape with the sect's wealth. He was also one of the main culprits who caused the internal strife of the sect. You are Yu Haoran? Jia Tongxi asked coldly with a condescending attitude. Disciple is Yu Haoran. When Yu Haoran bowed just now, he had already introduced himself. However, Jia Tongxi still questioned him even though he already knew the answer. This made Yu Haoran feel that something was wrong. I heard that you were the one who withstood 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret realm and left the secret realm unscathed. Jia Tongxi continued to ask. Yes. The secret realm for tempering the body is still one of the treasures of the 100 Qi Gate. It has existed in the sect for nearly 10,000 years and has been used by more than 1,000,000 disciples. Moreover, there is no shortage of peerless geniuses and demon-level disciples. However, no one has ever been able to withstand 10 times the gravity of the martial soldier realm with their own strength and physical strength. Therefore, at this point, Jia Tongxi did not continue, but Yu Haoran knew what he meant. Jia Tongxi suspected that he had withstood 10 times the gravity of the secret realm through opportunistic means. Furthermore, Jia Tongxi hoped that he would take the initiative to admit defeat and secretly contribute a portion of the reward. Jia Tongxi's framing made Chu Zhongyu, who was standing beside Yu Haoran, gloomy. He wanted to refute, but Yu Haoran reached out to stop him. Yu Haoran asked calmly with a cold expression, "Then what does Temple Master Jia want me to do to prove that I withstood 10 times the gravity of the secret realm with my own strength?" "It's very simple. Try again under my supervision," Jia Tongxi suggested, looking coldly at Chu Zhongyu. "Try again, no problem." Yu Haoran nodded, indicating that he could try again. However, his expression immediately changed and he asked in an unfriendly tone, "But I want to know, what right do you have to question Yu Haoran's passing of the secret realm?" Yu Haoran's words were very clear. He was saying that he, the temple master of the Merit Hall, had no right to deal with the reward for passing the secret realm. This made Jia Tongxi, who was very concerned about his reputation, furious. He threatened Yu Haoran fiercely. "Yu Haoran, you dare to offend your superiors, contradict and offend your elders. I can get the people from the law enforcement peak to arrest you now and send you to the death prison." In the face of Jia Tongxi's threat, Yu Haoran sneered disdainfully and said, "Jia Tongxi, you can try. Let's see who will be sent to the death prison in the end." "Wu Hao, go to the law enforcement peak and ask the Black Deacon, to come here." Jia Tongxi ordered a disciple of the Merit Hall behind him with a red face. "Ninth junior brother, you must not alarm the Black Deacon of the law enforcement peak. Otherwise, there will be no way to resolve today's matter." Chu Zhongyu quickly reminded Jia Tongxi when he saw that Jia Tongxi had sent someone to ask the Black Deacon of the law enforcement peak. Chapter 110. In front of the Achievement Hall. To tell the truth, although Yu Haoran greatly valued the rewards of clearing the secret territory, he would not risk his life for it. He would also not offend the Achievement Hall that he would need to exchange cultivation resources for in the future. However, when he wanted to take a step back, he unexpectedly saw an acquaintance in the Achievement Hall. It was a girl whose appearance was not very outstanding, but her personality was very docile. Because of his personality and aptitude, in his previous life when he was cultivating in the sect, other than his 8 senior brothers, he rarely came into contact with his fellow disciples. He had even fewer close friends. However, that girl was one of his few close friends. At that time, because of Lin Mingyao's heartlessness, he had been disheartened for a period of time. It was that girl who accompanied him through the darkest period of his life, allowing him to pull himself together. Because of his aptitude and talent, as well as his master's personality, he had always lacked cultivation resources. Not only did that girl privately give him a lot of spirit stones and medicinal pills, but she also took advantage of her position in the Achievement Hall. When he exchanged resources with her, she exchanged them with inferior ones for more cultivation resources. For this, she had been punished by the Achievement Hall more than once. Unfortunately, in his previous life, not only was his heart broken by Lin Mengyao, but he also spent most of his energy on increasing his cultivation and strength. He simply did not pay attention to that girl's efforts. What made Yu Haoran feel even more guilty was that until he saw that girl, he discovered that after his rebirth, his mind did not recall any memories of that girl. This made him feel deeply guilty, and at the same time, endless anger rose in his heart. This was because he remembered that after the 100 Chi Gate was destroyed, in order to find the remains of his master and several senior brothers, he had taken the risk to sneak into the ruins of the sect. He had accidentally seen Jia Tongxi, who had also sneaked into the ruins of the sect. At the same time, he had also seen Jia Tongxi's ugly face. Because he had been too anxious when he had fled the sect, Jia Tongxi did not have time to take away many of the treasures hidden in the achievement hall. Therefore, he had secretly sneaked back into the sect to take away those hidden treasures. While he was searching for treasures, he accidentally discovered that the 2 girls from the Achievement Palace Hall were still alive. They were just frightened by the extermination of their family and were hiding under a pile of rubble. Seeing an elder of their sect, and also the hall master of the Achievement Hall, the 2 frightened girls acted as if they had seen their family. They were so excited that they directly threw themselves into his arms. Perhaps it was because the actions of the 2 girls had evoked the desire in his heart. Or perhaps it was because his sect had been destroyed and he had lost his status as a tyrant, causing his heart to burn with lust. Although the 2 girls resisted with all their might, Jia Tongxi was a peak 9th grade martial king. Therefore, one could imagine what would happen next. If he had only forcefully taken over their bodies, as long as he didn't mistreat them afterwards, it could be considered giving these 2 pitiful girls a way out. However, after venting his bestial desires, Jia Tongxi actually destroyed their souls and shattered their bodies. Among the 2 girls who were humiliated, one of them was the girl who made him feel extremely guilty. Therefore, due to Jia Tongxi's oppression and his incomparable self-blame towards that girl, Yu Haoran decided that today, not only would he obtain the full reward for passing the secret realm, he would also make Jia Tongxi pay the price. After persuading Chu Zhongyu not to worry, Yu Haoran directly closed his eyes and rested. He completely ignored Jia Tongxi's threat and had an attitude of not fearing the law enforcement peak. This caused the surrounding disciples to feel extremely shocked. After all, as the law enforcement organization of the 100 Chi Gate, the law enforcement peak was one of the factions that many disciples feared. Normally, not to mention offending them, even if they saw someone from the law enforcement peak, they would have to avoid them. One was a welfare organization, while the other was a law enforcement organization. The Achievement Palace Hall and the law enforcement peak were not too far apart, and the relationship between the 2 factions had always been good. Therefore, after receiving Jia Tongxi's request, not only did the law enforcement peak's black impermanence personally come, even the white impermanence also rushed to the Achievement Palace Hall. Seeing the black impermanence and the white impermanence arrive at the same time, Jia Tongxi's face revealed a pleasantly surprised smile. Afterwards, he took the initiative to welcome them as he laughed loudly and said, "I didn't think that even Senior White would personally come. I heard that a disciple dared to offend his superiors and contradict the sect's elders. This is a great taboo of the sect. Our law enforcement peak cannot ignore this." White Impermanence, who was born unable to smile, coldly said, "Senior Black, Senior White, please." Jia Tongxi moved his body to the side and waved his right hand, indicating for the 2 to leave first. In terms of identity and status, as the Achievement Palace Hall Master, Jia Tongxi's status was much higher than the Black and White Impermanence. However, in terms of power, the law enforcement peak was the number 1 power in the 100 Chi Gate. Even the Gate Master and Vice Gate Master did not dare to look down on the law enforcement peak master's opinion. Moreover, the Black and White Impermanence were somewhat special. In terms of cultivation, with their peak 7th grade Martial King cultivation, it would not be excessive for them to become hall masters or elders with real power. However, for some reason, their status had always been deacons and they had never shown any dissatisfaction. When the Black and White Impermanence deacons arrived at the entrance of the Achievement Palace, Chu Zhongyu immediately stood in front of Yu Haoran and greeted him with a very respectful attitude. Qingyun Peak's head disciple, Chu Zhongyu, greets the black and white deacons. After coldly glancing at Chu Zhongyu, the black and white impermanence ignored him and looked directly at Yu Haoran, who was standing behind Chu Zhongyu. You are Yu Haoran? Black impermanence asked with a sinister tone. That's right, I am Yu Haoran. Without the slightest bit of respect, Yu Haoran coldly replied. Do you know what crime you committed? Facing Yu Haoran's rude actions, black impermanence did not immediately turn hostile. However, the slightly raised corner of his mouth showed that he was in a very bad mood. I don't know. Without any expression, Yu Haoran still replied coldly. While announcing Yu Haoran's crime, black impermanence took out a black iron chain and said, offending your superiors and ignoring your elders, according to the law, your cultivation will be abolished and you will be put in the death cell. Looking at black impermanence with contempt, Yu Haoran suddenly said a name and threatened, Fan Wujiu, do you dare to chain me? You, who are you? Hearing Yu Haoran's name, black impermanence suddenly took a few steps back and pointed at Yu Haoran. His voice trembled as he asked, Xie Bian, do you also want to convict me? Looking past black impermanence, Yu Haoran looked at white impermanence, who was dressed in white, and also said a name and continued to threaten. You. White impermanence did not expect that a new disciple would not only know black impermanence's name, but also know his name. How could he not be shocked? After all, in the entire 100 Qi Gate, only the peak master of the law enforcement peak knew their names and their approximate origins. Chapter 111. In front of the Achievement Hall. Seeing the shocked expressions of the black and white impermanence, the corners of Yu Haoran's mouth rose slightly, revealing a proud smile. To be honest, if the people from the law enforcement peak were not the black and white impermanence, but other deacons or hall masters, it would be very difficult for him to obtain the full reward for clearing the secret realm and punish Jia Tongxi for his crimes. After all, the Achievement Hall controlled the majority of the resources needed by the sect's disciples, deacons, hall masters, and ordinary elders. No one dared to easily offend the Achievement Hall, and even more so, offend the hall master, Jia Tongxi. However, the black and white impermanence were different. Firstly, because the cultivation method they practiced was very special, a portion of the resources they needed for cultivation was not something the Achievement Hall could provide. Although the Achievement Hall could also block a portion of their cultivation resources, it did not have much of an impact on their daily cultivation. Secondly, they were not originally from the 100 Qi Gate, but from a very special place. They were only training in the 100 Qi Gate for a short period of time. Once the training was over, they would leave the 100 Qi Gate, so they did not need to have any close interactions with anyone. Furthermore, this was also the fundamental reason why they were only overseers even though they were clearly peak 7th grade martial kings. Thirdly, because they were not originally from the 100 Qi Gate, and because of the requirements of the power behind them, they had to enforce the law impartially. Therefore, trying to rope in connections or bribe them would not be very effective. If they dared to bend the law for personal gain, as long as the power behind them found out, the consequences would be worse than death. Black impermanence, white impermanence, if you can enforce the law impartially, then I will not reveal your origins to anyone, nor will I tell on you behind your backs. You can rest assured about this. The duty of us black and white impermanence is to enforce the law impartially. We will not wrongly accuse a good person, nor will we let a bad person go. The white impermanence solemnly vowed. In response, Yu Haoran only sneered and did not give any response. Everyone has a weakness, especially in the 100 Qi Gate, where there was serious internal strife and everyone was selfish. Their nature had long changed. Fortunately, they were very afraid of the power behind them. They were afraid that the power behind them would know what they had done at the 100 Qi Gate. Therefore, they absolutely did not dare to have the slightest bit of selfishness in today's matter. Otherwise, they could not bear the consequences. Yu Haoran, where is it? White Impermanence still couldn't believe that Yu Haoran had such a clear understanding of the organization behind him. After all, even the peak master of the law enforcement peak, who knew the real background of the two brothers, did not know the exact location of the force behind them. Therefore, White Impermanence wanted to confirm whether or not Yu Haoran knew the true background of his brother, as well as the true location of the forces behind him. If they knew, then not only would the two brothers not help Jia Tongxi, they would even side with Yu Haoran to ensure that he would not reveal the secret to the power behind him. If they did not know, then it was possible that the peak master of the law enforcement peak had not kept his mouth shut and Yu Haoran had eavesdropped on him. Then, not only would they help Jia Tongxi take down Yu Haoran, they would also use the authority of the law enforcement peak to kill him directly to prevent future troubles. Yunzi Empire, a border town. Yu Haoran could tell what White Impermanence was thinking at a glance. However, he was not afraid at all and even mentioned the name of a place. In his previous life, he had obtained a map and a black token from a martial king who had accidentally killed him. According to the map, he had arrived at a border town in the Yunzi Empire, one of the three great empires of the Tianxian continent. He had then used the identity of the black token to sneak into a special force and lived in that force for half a month. In that half a month, not only had he found out many secrets about the Tianxian continent, he had also accidentally met the Black and White Impermanence and found out their true names and origins. Therefore, he had full confidence that the Black and White Impermanence would not easily side with Jia Tongxi and that they would not take revenge on him afterward. Phew! Taking a deep breath, the Black and White Impermanence looked at each other and saw the thoughts in each other's eyes. Then, the White Impermanence took a few steps back, while the Black Impermanence took a few steps forward and asked, "Yu Haoran, we have received a complaint from the Merit Hall Master, Jia Tongxi. He said that you have ignored the rules of the sect, offended your superiors, contradicted your teachers, and used tricks to deceive the sect's resources. Is this true?" In the beginning, they had judged Yu Haoran's crimes and now they were questioning him. The change in the Black Impermanence's attitude made Jia Tongxi feel that something was wrong. It seemed that by inviting the Black and White Impermanence, not only would they not help him get the reward for clearing the secret realm, but they might even let Yu Haoran get the huge amount of spiritual stones and pills for free. Thinking of this, Jia Tongxi gritted his teeth unwillingly and planned to take out a portion of the reward for clearing the secret realm in exchange for the support of the Black and White Impermanence. Therefore, he took a few steps forward and stood in front of the Black Impermanence. He gave him a look and said, "Lord Deacon, Yu Haoran has disregarded the sect's rules, offended his superiors, contradicted his teachers, and resorted to trickery to deceive the sect's resources. I have solid evidence. I hope that the two Lord Deacons can follow me to get the evidence." Ignoring Jia Tongxi's look, the Black Impermanence said coldly, "Since Master Jia has evidence, you might as well take it out directly. This way, not only will Yu Haoran and the people here be convinced, but it will also give us an explanation to the Peak Master." Jia Tongxi was suddenly speechless. The conflict between him and Yu Haoran had just happened. The framing just now was just a spur-of-the-moment idea. There was no evidence. He just wanted to bring the Black and White Impermanence to the secret room to discuss the distribution of the reward for clearing the secret realm. Who would have thought that the Black Impermanence would not give him face? "Master Jia, we, the law enforcement peak, are responsible for supervising the entire sect's illegal record. Everyone is very busy. If you have evidence, you can take it out now. If not, then we will turn around and go back now. Today's matter never happened. According to the requirements of the forces behind them, they still needed to live in the 100 Qi Gate for a long time. In order to ensure that he could secure another part of the resources for his own practice, he did not want to offend Jia Tongxi too much. Therefore, the best way was to turn today's matter into a small one, and a small one into nothing. Seeing that the black impermanence wanted to turn the matter into a small one, and a small one into nothing, Howren, who had not achieved his goal, would not be willing. Therefore, he took a step forward and stood directly in front of the black impermanence. Word by word, he questioned in a loud voice. Deacon Black, if someone deceives the sect's disciples, how should we deal with it? Chapter 112. In front of the Hall of Merit. Embezzling the benefits of the sect disciples was something that almost every hall master of the Hall of Merit had done. From the sect master to the new disciples, who didn't know that they had never been embezzled before. This was already a recognized unspoken rule in the 100 Chi Gate. What was the so-called unspoken rule? Everyone knew about it, but no one would say it out loud. However, judging from Howren's words, he wanted to expose the unspoken rule and use it to convict Jia Tongxi. However, Black Impermanence knew that since it was an unspoken rule, it was a rule that the upper echelons of the sect had tacitly agreed upon. It was impossible to convict Jia Tongxi with the crime of embezzling the benefits of the disciples. Seeing that Howren wanted to convict him with the unspoken rule of embezzling the benefits of the disciples, Jia Tongxi couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Then, his face sank and he acted as if he didn't know anything. He questioned the Hall of Merit staff in charge of distributing the benefits of the disciples. Is that so? Someone actually dares to embezzle the benefits of the disciples? How come I didn't know about it? In response to the Hall Master's question, the Hall of Merit is responsible for distributing the benefits of 29,378 disciples, 476 deacons, 113 Hall Masters, 48 elders, and special personnel every month. With only a dozen of us distributing so many cultivation resources, it's inevitable that there will be mistakes in the process of calculation and distribution. If the Hall Master and the 2 elders of the enforcement peak want to investigate, we will cooperate fully with the investigation and bear the punishment for our mistakes. However, we are not convinced. As Jia Tongxi's trusted aide, Suda, who was in charge of embezzling the benefits of the disciples, didn't need any reminder from Jia Tongxi. He directly attributed the crime of embezzling the benefits of the disciples to a mistake at work. Black Deacon, what kind of punishment will there be for a mistake at work? Jia Tongxi was very satisfied with Suda's answer. However, he glared at Suda with a gloomy face, indicating that he was very angry. Then, he looked at Black Impermanence and asked. According to the sect rules, a light punishment would be a scolding and a heavy punishment would be 50 lashes. Black Impermanence had expected Suda's answer, so he played along and avoided the heavy punishment. Hall Master Jia, this is the first time that the Law Enforcement Peak has received a report about the Achievement Hall embezzling the benefits of the disciples. It should only be a small mistake in the work. I hope that Hall Master Jia can properly reprimand the staff to prevent the same mistake in the future. Although the Black Impermanence followed the principle of turning big issues into small ones and small ones into nothing, the way they handled the matter just now was obviously biased towards Jia Tongxi. This made Howren realize that although the other party was afraid of the power behind them, they were not afraid of him telling on them without irrefutable evidence. Howren was not surprised by this at all. Moreover, the report about the deduction of the disciples' benefits was just an appetizer. He hoped that it would cause a trace of dissatisfaction in the hearts of the people present. After all, other than the upper echelons of the sect and the few legacy disciples, most of the disciples present had their benefits deducted. Moreover, it was more than once. It wasn't that these disciples weren't dissatisfied with the Achievement Hall, but they were afraid of the Achievement Hall's power and the lack of a leader. Black Impermanence, if someone secretly embezzles the sect's resources, what kind of punishment will they receive? Since the appetizer had been served, Howren directly brought out the first main dish. He wanted to see if this main dish could make the Black Impermanence enforce the law impartially. He wanted to see if he could rely on this main dish to take down Jia Tongxi. According to the sect's rules, regardless of the amount of resources that have been embezzled, once discovered, the person's cultivation will be crippled and thrown into the death cell. The heavy punishment is to be killed on the spot. Yu Haoran's first trump card shocked the Black Impermanence. As the Achievement Hall Master, Jia Tongxi was in charge of the entire sect's finances. If he wanted to embezzle some cultivation resources, it was a simple matter. Moreover, his brother-in-law was the vice-sect master, Lai Yan, who could contend with the sect master. With Lai Yan's protection, Jia Tongxi did not do a clean job of embezzling the sect's resources. He left behind a lot of clues. If one wanted to find evidence of him embezzling resources, it would not be a very troublesome matter. However, this kind of thing was usually only known by the upper echelons of the sect. The Black Impermanence did not think that Yu Haoran, who had just entered the sect, would not only know about it, but also directly report it in front of everyone. This made him not know how to side with Jia Tongxi. Since this is the case, then I will report the Achievement Hall Master, Jia Tongxi, for embezzling a large amount of the sect's resources for his own use. Pointing at Jia Tongxi, Yu Haoran loudly said, "What? Embezzling the sect's resources? How could the upper echelons not know?" After hearing Yu Haoran's report, the surrounding disciples, who did not know about this secret, suddenly began to discuss. This is very normal. Since the Achievement Hall dared to embezzle the benefits of our large sect's disciples, it shows that not only do they have someone behind them, but they are also daring. What's so strange about embezzling the sect's resources? A well-versed disciple disdainfully mocked. But embezzling our benefits can be explained by a work error. Then, privately embezzling the sect's resources, I don't know what reason they have to cover it up. A disciple, who had long been dissatisfied with the Achievement Hall, gloated. "Tch, even if it's a report, what's the use? Vice-sect Master Lai has the backing of Palace Master Jia. The law enforcement peak master and vice-sect Master Lai are very close friends. In the end, the crime of embezzling the sect's resources will definitely be reduced to a small matter, and a small matter will be ignored. Yu Haoran, watch your words. If you don't have irrefutable evidence, be careful that I will sue you for slander, as well as slandering the sect's elders. According to the sect's rules, your cultivation will be abolished and you will be directly sent to the death row." The flustered and exasperated Jia Tongxi blatantly threatened. Privately embezzling the sect's resources was different from embezzling the benefits of the disciples. Embezzling the benefits of the disciples was an unspoken rule on the surface. All the previous Achievement Hall Masters had done this. Therefore, even if everyone knew about it, it would not affect him in the slightest. However, privately embezzling the sect's resources was different. In order to increase the strength of his brother-in-law's faction, and also to satisfy his own selfish desires, he not only embezzled the sect's resources, but also embezzled a shocking amount. In addition, the internal strife within the sect was cruel. If someone used the crime of embezzling the sect's resources, it was very likely that Lai Yan would be heavily injured. In order to preserve his own strength, Lai Yan would definitely sacrifice the pawn to protect the cart and push himself out to take the blame. Therefore, no matter how Yu Haoran reported him, he could not admit it. He could not even let others see his modesty. What if I have irrefutable evidence? Facing the flustered and exasperated Jia Tongxi who was threatening him, Yu Haoran sneered and asked, "Where is the evidence?" Jia Tongxi asked nervously. Because of Lai Yan's strength in the sect, when he embezzled the sect's resources, he was not very careful and left a lot of clues. As long as someone carefully investigated, they would definitely be able to find evidence of him embezzling the sect's resources. Chapter 113. In front of the Hall of Merit. Ignoring Jia Tongxi's nervous questioning, Yu Haoran's gaze turned to the silent white impermanence, and then continued to look at him. If the evidence is conclusive, we will definitely abide by the sect's laws and enforce the law impartially. We will definitely not be biased towards Jia Tongxi. Yu Haoran had been staring at his actions. White impermanence knew what he meant. He was forcing him to make a statement. Thinking of the various methods the faction behind him used to punish subordinates who made mistakes, White impermanence could only temporarily abandon them, the Hall of Merit, and Vice Head Lai Yan's interests. He chose to save his own life. I hope you can do as you say. Otherwise, in less than 3 days, a certain judge will know everything that happened today. Yu Haoran laughed coldly as he threatened. Hearing Yu Haoran mention a certain judge, the black impermanence's face turned pale from fear. As for white impermanence, although his expression didn't change much, from his slightly trembling body, one could tell that he was afraid of that judge. Let's go, follow me to get the evidence. After threatening the black and white impermanence, Yu Haoran walked towards the east side of the Hall of Merit. Chapter 114. East Side of the Hall of Achievements. Yu Haoran, this is just a normal switch used by mortals. You only need to press the protruding stone 3 times, with 3 seconds between each press, to open the switch. Just as Yu Haoran was observing the structure of the mechanism on the ground, Thaling, who had already understood the structure of the switch, reminded him. Although he did not know why Yu Haoran would suddenly start a conflict with a hall master, and it was a conflict that would not end until one of them was dead, he had to ensure Yu Haoran's safety at all times in order to avoid disaster and possibly obtain a new life. Thus, when Yu Haoran had Chu Zhongyu blast open the cultivation room, he had already used his divine sense to carefully search every corner of the cultivation room and discovered the mechanism. To be honest, after discovering the mechanism, Thaling was also impressed by Jia Tongxi's reverse thinking. Using the mechanism set up by mortals, and the habit of martial ancestor realm experts to use their divine sense to investigate, the normal mechanism set up in the cultivation room was difficult to discover even for a peak martial king or even martial saint realm expert. The reason why he was able to discover and understand the structure of the mechanism was because of the law of time in the victor. After receiving Thaling's reminder, Yu Haoran's eyes could not help but light up, following which, his right palm pressed against the protruding stone. Yu Haoran, what will it take for you to let me go? Just as Yu Haoran was about to press down on the protruding stone, Jia Tongxi's flustered and exasperated voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Yu Haoran paused in his action of pressing down on the stone and turned his head to look at Jia Tongxi. Following which, he looked past him and directly at the girl who had also walked out of the Hall of Achievements. He smiled slightly, then his expression darkened. His right palm pressed down on the protruding stone 3 times every 3 seconds. As the protruding stone completely collapsed, a light friction sound could be heard. Along with a slight sound of friction, the place where the stone protruded from slowly cracked open, finally revealing a hole that could accommodate an adult's entry and exit. Eldest senior brother, help me guard the entrance. After the cave was completely formed, Yu Haoran warned Chu Zhongyu and planned to enter the cave immediately. This was because he wanted to find the evidence that Jia Tongxi had secretly intercepted the sect's resources for so many years. He also wanted to see if there were any treasures that were suitable for him among the treasures that Jia Tongxi had kept for so many years. After all, he had a victor that could store things, so he could take any treasure he wanted without anyone noticing. How dare you! Just as Yu Haoran was about to enter the cave, Jia Tongxi, who was on the verge of panic, clenched his teeth and stomped his feet. In a flash, he appeared beside Yu Haoran and kicked him directly. Seeing that Jia Tongxi had actually launched a sneak attack on Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu roared and subconsciously blocked in front of Yu Haoran. Although Chu Zhongyu was already a peak 9th grade martial great master, Jia Tongxi was a peak 6th grade martial king. Faced with Jia Tongxi's kick, Chu Zhongyu realized that he could not block it at all. Eldest senior brother, quickly dodge. Jia Tongxi's sneak attack was also out of Yu Haoran's expectations. This was because in his memory, Jia Tongxi was not a decisive person. He usually liked to use his power to oppress others and use his power to settle everything. Therefore, he did not have time to ask Thaling for help and could only shout loudly. Looking at Yu Haoran, who was standing behind him, Chu Zhongyu did not even think of dodging. He subconsciously gathered all of his yuan power, intending to block the kick. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the difference in strength between a martial king and a martial great master. Just as Jia Tongxi's kick was about to land on his body, the threat of death caused his entire consciousness to become sluggish. Fortunately, just as the kick was about to land on his body, a gentle force enveloped his body, freeing him from the threat of death. However, the sudden appearance of the gentle force was only able to neutralize the fatal threat of the kick. It was unable to neutralize the impact of the kick. In the end, Chu Zhongyu was still sent flying by the kick, revealing Yu Haoran, who was standing behind him. Although the timely appearance of the force had prevented Chu Zhongyu's death, Yu Haoran felt extremely remorseful when he thought about how his negligence and carelessness had almost caused his eldest senior brother's death. He looked at Jia Tongxi with eyes filled with an uncontrollable murderous intent. Come out. Jia Tongxi was very familiar with the power of his kick. To be able to neutralize the power of the kick through the air, the attacker was at least a 7th grade martial king. In the 100 Qi Gate, there were not many high-level martial kings who would risk offending both the Hall of Merit and the Vice-Sect Master Lai Yin. Therefore, Jia Tongxi had already guessed who the attacker was. However, in the face of Jia Tongxi's reprimand, the attacker did not appear. In fact, Jia Tongxi was not the only one who had guessed who the attacker was. Yu Haoran also knew who this person was. Moreover, he also knew the reason why this person did not appear. It was because Jia Tongxi's status was not on the same level as his. He was waiting for the person behind Jia Tongxi to appear, which was also waiting for Lai Yen to appear. If he wanted to punish Jia Tongxi and force out Lai Yen behind him, he would have to find a way to enter the cave. At the same time, judging from Jia Tongxi's desperate reaction just now, Yu Haoran guessed that the account book did not only record the records of him secretly intercepting the sect's cultivation resources. If he wanted to stop Jia Tongxi, who was a peak 6th grade martial king, he would need the black and white impermanents, who were also martial kings. Therefore, Yu Haoran forcefully suppressed the murderous intent in his heart and glared at the black and white impermanents with an unfriendly expression. You too, what is the meaning of this? Could it be that your wings have hardened and you've already ignored the judge and the king of hell's control and planned to establish your own sect? Yu Haoran, we also did not expect Palace Master Jia to make a move, so we were unable to stop him in time. I hope you don't misunderstand. Seeing Yu Haoran's heavy breathing and unfriendly expression, the white impermanents knew that he was truly angry. Moreover, Yu Haoran had not only mentioned the judge who would decide their future and fate, but also the king of hell who could control their lives and death. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the white impermanence or the black impermanence, they did not dare to be negligent in the slightest. The white impermanence explained to Yu Haoran as she signaled the black impermanence to block Jia Tongxi and not let him continue attacking Yu Haoran. You too, my patience is not very good, so this is my last warning. Otherwise, I will immediately use a special channel and tell the judge and the king of hell everything that happened today. After threatening the black and white impermanence, Yu Haoran turned around and glanced at Chu Zhongyu, who had returned to his side, and asked with concern, "Eldest senior, are you all right?" At this moment, not only was Chu Zhongyu's face slightly pale, his breathing was also very chaotic. It was obvious that he was quite frightened by the sneak attack just now. "Ninth Junior, I'm fine. After taking a few deep breaths, Chu Zhongyu barely managed to adjust his breathing, indicating that he was fine. Chapter 115. Achievement Hall, in front of the cave entrance. When facing Jia Tongshi's sneak attack, Chu Zhongyu knew that he was no match for him, but he still stood in front of him without fear of death. Although Yu Haoran was touched by his actions, he didn't want him to do so. That was because since he dared to provoke Jia Tongshi, a peak rank 6 martial king, he had already made preparations in advance. In fact, he had even used a secret technique to overdraft his potential to defeat and kill Jia Tongshi. Therefore, he wanted to deal with the trouble he caused himself. Chu Zhongyu didn't agree, nor did he refute, because he was very clearly aware in his heart that if he encountered such a situation again, then he would instinctively take the initiative to stand in front of Yu Haoran. This was his character, and it was also his habit of doing things. Eldest senior brother, the person who saved you just now was Master. Now that Master has made his move, the black and white impermanence wouldn't dare to ignore it. Therefore, Jia Tongshi doesn't dare to continue attacking. Next, I'm going to enter the cave. So, help me guard the cave entrance. Indicating for Chu Zhongyu to continue guarding the cave entrance, Yu Haoran bent his body and entered the cave entrance. After entering the cave entrance, the situation was similar to what he expected. The cave entrance didn't extend very long, only about 20 meters. He arrived at the end of the tunnel, in front of a stone room made of bluestone. Without any hesitation, Yu Haoran directly stepped into the stone room. Although the area of the stone room was not very big, less than 40 square meters, the entire stone room was filled with shining divine weapons, and piles of 8th grade, 7th grade, and even 6th grade spirit stones that exuded rich spirit chi. On the shelf on the left, there were dozens of jade boxes containing elixirs of unknown grades and hundreds of pill bottles of different types and grades. On the shelf on the right, there were all kinds of mental cultivation methods, martial skills, ores, and hundreds of other precious treasures. Although the treasures in front of him made Yu Haoran very jealous, he couldn't wait to put all of them into the victor. However, he knew that he couldn't do it for the time being. This was because he risked offending Lai Yan and even a large portion of the sect's upper echelons in hopes of punishing Jia Tongshi and making him receive the sect's cruelest punishment. Therefore, before he could find evidence to punish Jia Tongshi, he couldn't touch any of the treasures in the stone room. His gaze quickly swept across the entire stone room. His gaze finally stopped on the shelves of mental cultivation methods and martial skills. This was because on that shelf there was a familiar account book. Yu Haoran walked to the wooden shelf and reached out to pick up the account book on the wooden shelf. He opened it and read it carefully. While Yu Haoran was carefully reading the records in the account book, he did not notice that the tower spirit had quietly taken away a few inconspicuous treasures. The more he read, the more the book, the more serious Yu Haoran, the more. After reading a dozen pages of the account book, he suddenly closed the account book. A trace of hesitation appeared on his face. Yu Haoran didn't expect that Jia Tongshi, who seemed to be Liu Yan's trusted aide, would secretly collude with so many of the sect's upper echelons. Moreover, from the account book's records, not only did he have connections with the sect's upper echelons, he even had connections with the 100 Chi Gates enemy sections. Yu Haoran knew that as long as he publicized the contents of the account book, Jia Tongshi would definitely die. However, the entire 100 Chi Gate would probably immediately fall into chaos. It might even cause an uncontrollable panic that would eventually evolve into internal strife. The life and death of the 100 Chi Gate didn't have much to do with him. However, the current strength of the Qinyan faction wasn't enough to establish themselves in the Tianxian continent, or rather, in this region. Therefore, what Yu Haoran needed to consider was whether he should publicize the contents of the account book. Ninth junior brother, come out quickly. The gate master and the 2 vice gate masters have already arrived. Just as Yu Haoran was hesitating whether or not to publicize the contents of the account book, Chu Zhongyu's voice came from outside the cave. Forget it. Hearing that the three gate masters had arrived at the same time, Yu Haoran finally thought it through. Although he didn't care about the life and death of the 100 Qi Gate, the senior brothers of the Qingyun faction still needed the sect's protection for a period of time. Moreover, with his master's loyalty to the sect in his previous life, he might also be involved in the final internal strife. Therefore, he decided not to publicize the contents of the account book for the time being. However, even if he didn't publicize it, he still needed to use the account book to exchange with the Gate Master, the two Vice Gate Masters, and even the Board of Elders for all the resources that belonged to him and the Qingyun faction. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran continued to open the account book as he slowly walked towards the cave entrance. Ninth junior brother, how is it? Seeing Yu Haoran open the account book as he walked out of the cave entrance, Chu Zhongyu asked anxiously. He had offended the Hall of Merit and Enforcer Peak by directly contradicting Jia Tongxi and threatening the Black and White Deacons. Moreover, he had just blasted open Jia Tongxi's cultivation room and had already fought with him. The two sides were basically in a situation where only one side would rest. If Yu Haoran could find evidence that Jia Tongxi had secretly intercepted the sect's resources, then they could still retreat safely today. However, if he couldn't find evidence, he and his ninth junior brother, and even the entire Qingyun faction would suffer unbearable punishment. Closing the account book, Yu Haoran nodded to Chu Zhongyu, then looked at Jia Tongxi. He found that Jia Tongxi's spirit seemed to have been sucked out in an instant, and he looked very depressed. Looking past Jia Tongxi, he finally stopped at three middle-aged men with extraordinary temperaments and strong auras, but their faces were gloomy. The middle-aged man standing in the middle was called Zhao Ji, and he was the leader of the 100 Qi Gate. He was also the strongest of the 5 martial emperors in the 100 Qi Gate. The slightly younger middle-aged man standing to the left of Zhao Ji was called Zhong Fakan, and he was the other deputy leader of the 100 Qi Gate. He was also a martial emperor expert. Taking a deep breath, Yu Haoran walked up to the 3 middle-aged men and greeted them with the etiquette of a disciple. Qingyun Peak disciple, Yu Haoran greets the leader and the 2 deputy leaders. No need to be so polite. Zhao Ji, who was standing in the middle of the 3, said. Looking up at Zhao Ji, Yu Haoran's eyes flashed with a complicated look. Putting aside his identity and status, Zhao Ji was actually a gentle person who treated people kindly and tolerated everything. He could be considered a respectable expert. However, a person with this kind of character was not suitable to be the leader. Unfortunately, fate had placed him in the position of the leader of the 100 Qi Gate, and it also made the internal strife in the 100 Qi Gate even more brutal. You are Yu Haoran, the disciple with the most outstanding talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance among the new disciples. Zhao Ji asked with a smile as he looked at Yu Haoran, who was not nervous at all and had a very calm expression. Chapter 116. Achievement Hall, outside the cave entrance. Sect Leader, Deputy Sect Leaders, Yu Haoran has something to discuss with you. He could not cause internal strife in the 100 Qi Gate, but he also had to make full use of the account book to obtain the greatest benefits for himself and Qingyun Peak. Therefore, the 3 people with the highest authority in the 100 Qi Gate were the most suitable targets for negotiation. All right, what do you want to talk about? Zhao Ji looked at the account book in Yu Haoran's hand, then turned to look at Lai Yan and Zhong Fakan. After receiving their signal, Zhao Ji nodded in agreement. Master. After receiving Zhao Ji's agreement, Yu Haoran looked directly at Qingyun Peak and called out softly. Then, a middle-aged man with an elegant temperament appeared beside Yu Haoran without anyone noticing. Seeing Feng Qingyun suddenly appear beside Yu Haoran, Lai Yan, Zhong Fakan, and Zhao Ji could not help but frown. This was because even with their cultivation in the martial royal realm, they could not detect how Feng Qingyun appeared beside Yu Haoran. To be able to do this, it meant that Feng Qingyun was also in the martial royal realm like them. However, when did Feng Qingyun break through to the martial royal realm? Why did they not know anything about it? When Feng Qingyun appeared beside Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu hurriedly stepped forward and thanked him. "Thank you, Master, for saving us. Don't be so reckless in the future. Listen to your 9th junior brother's advice." Although Feng Qingyun was very pleased with the unity and friendliness between the disciples, he was still somewhat dissatisfied with Chu Zhongyu's reckless and overconfident behavior. Therefore, he gave a rare stern reprimand. "Disciple will follow master's orders." Chu Zhongyu hurriedly admitted his mistake. "Sect leader, deputy sect leaders, I hope that my master can also participate in the following discussion," Yu Haoran suggested. Yu Haoran had already decided on the location of the secret meeting, which was the stone room where Jia Tongxi kept his treasures. With the help of a room full of rare treasures, he would be able to verify the authenticity and shock of the account book. However, Zhao Ji, Lai Yan, and Zhong Fakan were all martial emperors. Unlike Jia Tongxi, who was a 6th-grade martial king, he could use a secret technique to temporarily increase his strength. As long as he was willing to pay a price, he could kill his opponent. However, he had no way to deal with a martial emperor expert. Moreover, they were 3 martial royal realm experts. Unless his cultivation could break through to the martial ancestor realm and he could use the power of his spiritual soul, he would not be able to use the means to resist a martial emperor realm powerhouse. Yu Haoran was worried that if Zhao Ji, Lai Yan, and Zhong Fakan were provoked by the secret in the account book, and they chose to kill him to keep the secret of the account book, then he might die without knowing why. After looking at each other, Zhao Ji nodded and agreed. "Okay. Eldest senior brother, guard the entrance of the cave. Kill anyone who dares to enter the cave." After getting Zhao Ji's agreement, Yu Haoran instructed Chu Zhongyu. "If you encounter a martial king expert or above, you can temporarily avoid them and leave them to the 3 sect leaders and master." I understand." Chu Zhongyu nodded and replied. Zhao Ji, Lai Yan, and Zhong Fakan could not help but frown. This was because Yu Haoran's actions just now were clearly a bit presumptuous. However, when they saw the account book in Yu Haoran's hand and Feng Qingyun's exposed cultivation, they finally chose to remain silent. Nodding his head at Feng Qingyun, Yu Haoran took the lead and entered the cave. Feng Qingyun did not hesitate in the slightest as he followed closely behind. Lai Yan, who was the last to enter the cave, instructed an elder with a cultivation of peak 8th-grade martial king who had just arrived at the scene. "Elder Zhao, you and martial nephew Chu guard the entrance of the cave. Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter the cave. Anyone who disobeys will be killed." "Understood," Elder Zhao replied and then stood in front of Chu Zhongyu, as if he was the leader. Chu Zhongyu only frowned in response, but did not say anything. "Take a look." Looking at the 3 sect leaders who had entered the stone room and were shocked by the rare treasures in the room, Yu Haoran directly threw the account book in his hand to them. Then, he explained the contents of the account book to Master in a low voice. Even Feng Qingyun, who had no desires and did not compete for anything, could not help but angrily scold after hearing a small part of the account book. "This is too much." As the spiritual leader of the 100 Qi Gate, Zhao Ji roared in anger, "Jia Tongxi, you deserve to die." As for Lai Yan and Zhong Fakan, they were silent. Because most of the records in the account book were about the 2 of them, combined with the room full of rare treasures, they did not know how to refute. However, for Vice Sect leader Lai Yan, he wanted nothing more than to slap Jia Tongxi to death. In order to let Jia Tongxi become the hall master of the Merit Hall, he did not know how much effort he had put in, and how much territory and benefits he had given away in order to let Jia Tongxi become the hall master of the Merit Hall. He did not expect that Jia Tongxi would not only record the time, place, and amount of the sect's resources that he had secretly intercepted, but he also privately traded with others, and even with the enemies of the 100 Qi Gate. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that killing him with a slap would be too easy. If it were not for Zhao Ji and Zhong Fakan by his side, he would definitely turn around and leave the cave. Then, he would grab Jia Tongxi and extract his soul to let him know the consequences of betraying him. He would let him have a taste of what it meant to live a life worse than death. Sect leader, vice sect leaders, the contents of the account book have nothing to do with me, Yu Haoran, or the Clear Cloud Peak. Therefore, as for how to punish Jia Tongxi and how to deal with the records in the account book, my master and I will not express any opinions. Seeing Zhao Ji close the account book, Yu Haoran expressed the attitude of his faction. Yu Haoran clearly saw Zhao Ji and Liu Yan's reaction just now, especially the way Liu Yan gnashed his teeth. He knew that he did not need to add fuel to the fire. Jia Tongxi would not be able to escape death. Therefore, his tone changed and he began to fight for his own interests. I believe sect leader and vice sect leaders also know the reason for my conflict with Hall Master Jia. Now my request is very simple. Just give me the full reward for clearing the secret territory. The reward for clearing the secret territory. Hearing Yu Haoran mention the reward for clearing the secret territory, Zhao Ji could not help but frown. Seeing the puzzled look on Zhao Ji's face, Liu Yan quickly stepped forward and briefly introduced Yu Haoran's experience of clearing the secret territory's tenfold gravity. Hearing that Yu Haoran had not only withstood the tenfold gravity of the secret territory's independent space, but also walked out of the secret territory unscathed, Zhao Ji looked at Yu Haoran in shock. As the sect leader of the 100 Qi Gate, Zhao Ji had a more detailed understanding of the secret territory. He knew that those who could clear the secret territory would definitely be able to build a perfect physical body. Chapter 117. In the Stone Chamber, Zhao Ji thought of the talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance that Yu Haoran had displayed when he had entered the sect. Then, he thought of the fact that Yu Haoran was able to create a perfect body. He knew that as long as nothing unexpected happened, Yu Haoran would become a peak martial saint at the very least. When he thought of this, the dissatisfaction he had felt towards Yu Haoran due to Zhao Sinyu's instigation instantly disappeared. At the same time, he thought of Qingyun Peak's current situation and immediately wanted to rope him in. Zhao Ji made his decision without discussing it with Liu Yan and Zhong Fakan. Yu Haoran, the reward for clearing the mystic realm is a rule set by the 19th Gate Master of the 100 Qi Gate. Jia Tongxi dared to obstruct your reward. This is his fault, it has nothing to do with you. According to the sect's rules, the reward for clearing the mystic realm is what it should be. In a moment, take my Gate Master token and go to the Hall of Merit to receive it. If they dare to obstruct or embezzle, there is no need to report it. Just inform the Enforcer Peak and let them arrest them. At this point, Zhao Ji glanced at the mountain of spirit stones, pills, spirit herbs, and other precious treasures in the stone chamber. Then, he reached out and sucked. Immediately, hundreds of 8th-level spirit stones, close to 1,000 9th-level spirit stones, a dozen pill bottles, and a dozen wooden boxes containing spirit herbs flew into the air and floated in front of Yu Haoran. These spirit stones, pills, and spirit herbs are to compensate you for the injustice you have suffered this time. Furthermore, I promise you that if you encounter such injustice in the future, you can come to me directly or go to the Enforcer Peak's Peak Master, Gao Luanfeng. He and I can make decisions for you. Thank you for your gift, Gate Master. Looking at the spirit stones, pills, and spirit herbs floating in front of him and hearing Zhao Ji's promise, Yu Haoran excitedly thanked the Gate Master. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't tempted by the treasures in front of him, but in order to punish Jia Tongxi and not leave any evidence behind, he suppressed the greed in his heart and didn't touch any of the treasures in the stone room, even if it was only the lowest grade of 8th grade spirit stone. Now, Zhao Ji had actually taken out a portion of his resources to compensate for the grievances he had suffered. How could Yu Haoran not be happy? Of course, although he was happy, he could basically guess the reason why Zhao Ji did this. He also knew what kind of person Zhao Ji was, so he kept a clear head in his heart. Master. Yu Haoran turned his head to look at Feng Qingyun and pointed at the spirit stones, pills, and spirit herbs floating in front of him. Not only were there people present, but they were all martial emperors. He could not put these spiritual herbs and pills into the victor, nor could he take away the spiritual stones and pills with him. Therefore, Master could only use the heaven and earth sleeve technique to temporarily store the spiritual energy and medicinal pills. With a wave of his wide sleeve, the spirit stones, pills, and spirit herbs that were floating in front of him disappeared without a trace. Then, Feng Qingyun looked at the zither on the shelf on the east side of the stone room and said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhao, Senior Martial Brother Lai, Senior Martial Brother Zhong, I am willing to take out a portion of my treasures in exchange for this zither. What do you think?" Junior Martial Brother Feng, there is no need to be so polite. Since you like this zither, just take it. Seeing the zither on the shelf that Feng Qingyun had taken a liking to, Zhao Ji was shocked. He scanned the zither with his divine sense and found that it was an ordinary magic tool that had just entered the king tier. Although king tier magic tools were very precious, they could only be considered ordinary among the divine weapons in the stone room. Not to mention, if he wanted to rope in Yu Haoran, he would definitely have to go through Feng Qingyun. Using a king-grade artifact that could barely be considered precious to get on Feng Qingyun's good side was definitely a good deal. Seeing sect leader Zhao pretend to be generous and give the zither to Feng Qingyun, Thowling and the victor sneered disdainfully. In the entire stone room, aside from the few treasures that he had taken, this zither could be said to be the most precious treasure. As long as he used the power of a special law to activate the origin energy hidden in the magic tool, this zither would immediately reveal its peak saint tier grade. If he used the power of a special law to nourish it and raise Feng Qingyun's cultivation to the peak of the martial saint realm, then he might be able to cultivate a self-aware magic tool spirit. This would allow the zither to become an emperor weapon, or even a divine weapon in the future. Sect leader, vice sect leader, my master and I will not participate in the following matters. We will take our leave first. Seeing Feng Qingyun accept the zither, Yu Haoran said his goodbyes. Alright. How to punish Jia Tongxi and how to deal with the rare treasures in the stone room was no longer something that Yu Haoran, who had just entered the sect, could participate in. Moreover, the people involved in the account book were also not people that an ordinary peak master like Feng Qingyun could participate in. Therefore, when Yu Haoran took the initiative to leave with Feng Qingyun, Zhao Ji readily agreed. Master, let's go. Nodding to Feng Qingyun, Yu Haoran took the lead and left the stone room as usual. After leaving the cave entrance, Yu Haoran was shocked by the scene in front of him. The originally neat and clean floor was now full of potholes. In the air, there were still remnant fluctuations of spirit and yuanli. Without much thought, Yu Haoran knew that after they entered the stone room, there must have been a fierce battle outside the cave entrance. Moreover, according to the remnant fluctuations of spirit and yuanli, he knew that the battle just now had not been small. However, he did not feel a trace of it in the stone room. He immediately became interested in the materials used to build the stone room. Master, 9th junior brother. Seeing Feng Qingyun and Yu Haoran walk out of the cave entrance, Chu Zhongyu, who did not have any yuanli or spirit fluctuations, greeted them. Seeing Yu Haoran's gaze stop on the potholes on the ground, he softly explained what had just happened. It turned out that after Yu Haoran and the others entered the stone room, Jia Tongxi suddenly wanted to escape the achievement hall and the 100 Qi gate. However, the black and white deacons, who were already prepared, stopped him in time. Originally, with the black and white deacons' strength, it would not be difficult to capture Jia Tongxi. However, no one would have thought that Jia Tongxi not only had an extremely powerful peak emperor-level magic weapon, but also a 7th level 9th grade mixed yuan pill that could raise one's cultivation level by 3 stages. Jia Tongxi, who was already a peak 6th grade martial king, directly reached the peak 9th grade martial king after taking the mixed yuan pill. Then, with the help of the emperor-level magic weapon, he consecutively injured the black and white deacons, as well as Elder Zhao, who was arranged by Lai Yen. If it were not for a giant hand reaching out from the law enforcement peak at the last moment to defeat and capture Jia Tongxi, he might really have been able to escape the 100 Qi gate today. After hearing Chu Zhongyu's explanation, Yu Haoren's gaze turned to the law enforcement peak, to the place that he could not see through. Just as Chu Zhongyu said, if it were not for the law enforcement peak master personally taking action, Jia Tongxi would definitely be able to escape the 100 Qi gate. Chapter 118. Achievement Hall, in front of the cave entrance. Thinking of how Gao Luanfeng, the peak lord of the enforcement peak, dealt with matters, he also thought of Zhao Ji and Lian's anger when they saw the account book. Now that Jia Tongxi had failed to escape, he knew that Jia Tongxi would not be able to escape this time. Everything he did just now could be considered as making up for what he owed to that girl in his previous life. The relaxation of his mind immediately caused his emotions to fluctuate, and the fluctuation of his emotions caused the bottleneck to loosen. His newly stabilized 3rd grade martial warrior realm once again had an opportunity to break through. Eldest senior brother, a knot in my heart has suddenly been untied, causing my realm to loosen. Right now I need to return to the Hidden Moon Pavilion to break through. Feeling the loosening of the bottleneck, Yu Haoren immediately planned to return to the Hidden Moon Pavilion to break through. Therefore, he needed his eldest senior brother to take advantage of the current situation to help him get the reward for passing the secret realm. 9th junior brother, you go back with master first. I promise to help you get the reward for passing the secret realm. Taking the Gate Lord token from Yu Haoren, Chu Zhongyu solemnly promised. Thank you, eldest senior brother. Nodding towards Chu Zhongyu, Yu Haoren's gaze turned towards Feng Qinyun. Let's go. Feng Qinyun reminded before wrapping up Yu Haoren and rushing towards the clear cloud peak. Raising his head to look at the disappearing figures of Feng Qinyun and Yu Haoren, Chu Zhongyu's face revealed a trace of excitement. This was because he never would have thought that less than 5 days after becoming a disciple of the 100 Qi Gate, Yu Haoren, who was only a 3rd grade martial warrior, would not only successfully resolve the Achievement Hall Lord's slander, but also threaten the black and white deacons to force Jia Tongxi to defect. The various methods that Yu Haoren had just displayed made him feel excited, and more than half of the burden that had been on his shoulders had been released in an instant. With the release of the pressure, the bottleneck that had troubled him for a long time finally showed signs of loosening. Based on the current trend of the bottleneck loosening, he would be able to break through to the martial king realm in half a year to a year. However, before this, he needed to help Yu Haoren get the reward for passing the secret realm. Thinking of this, he held the Gate Lord token in his hand and walked towards the Achievement Hall. Qinyun Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. With the help of the large amount of spirit stones and pills he obtained from the stone room, as well as the loosening of the bottleneck caused by his fluctuating emotions, Yu Haoren was able to easily raise his cultivation to the peak of 3rd grade martial warrior. At the same time, with the help of the spiritual energy from his breakthrough, his physical body also increased by a small grade, reaching the peak of the 6th grade martial warrior. Yu Haoren spat out the turbid air that had accumulated in his chest after his breakthrough and opened his eyes. Right now, His cultivation was already at the peak of 3rd grade martial warrior, and his physical body was at the peak of 6th grade martial warrior. With his true strength, he wouldn't need to fear a 7th grade martial warrior. Next, if he wanted to increase his cultivation and strength without any side effects, he could only follow his master's instructions and go to the depths of the mountain range to train. Not only were there a large number of beasts in the depths of the mountain range, but there were also many high-grade beasts and beasts with special bloodlines. In order to avoid any accidents, he needed to prepare enough pills and spirit stones to recover his essence force. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran slightly wrinkled his brows. He got up and left the cultivation room, heading straight for the serene pavilion where his senior lived. According to the time, his senior should have already received the reward for clearing the secret realm and returned to Qingyun Peak. Moreover, according to his senior's personality, he should have personally delivered the reward to the Hidden Moon Pavilion. However, he didn't. Thus, Yu Haoran felt that his senior was either delayed by something or met with an accident. Using gale steps, he arrived in front of the serene pavilion. Seeing the open door, Yu Haoran couldn't help but wrinkle his brows. However, he didn't think too much about it and directly entered the serene pavilion. "Senior brothers, why are you all here?" After entering the serene pavilion, Yu Haoran discovered that not only were his 7 senior brothers and Wu Jingjun present, but their expressions were also quite grave. This caused Yu Haoran to have a bad feeling. "Ninth junior brother, you're here." Raising his head to look at Yu Haoran, the 2nd senior brother greeted him with a grave expression. "Second senior brother, did something happen to eldest senior brother?" Yu Haoran asked in a gloomy voice. After hearing Yu Haoran's question, the senior brothers looked at each other. In the end, the 5th senior brother, Huang Zonghua, who was good with words, explained. After hearing Huang Zonghua's explanation, a strong murderous aura rose from Yu Haoran's body. Even his senior brothers, who had reached the martial ancestor realm, couldn't help but take a few steps back. It turned out that after he had followed Feng Qingyun back to Qingyun Peak, Chu Zhongyu had used the sect leader's token and the achievement hall's lack of a leader to help Yu Haoran receive the full reward for clearing the secret realm. He had also forced the achievement hall to take out an extra batch of spirit stones and pills to compensate Yu Haoran for being slandered. However, on the way back to Qingyun Peak with Wu Jingjun, Chu Zhongyu had suddenly been ambushed by an enemy. In order to protect Wu Jingjuan's safety, Chu Zhongyu had not only lost the large amount of cultivation resources he had just received, but he had also suffered serious injuries. At this moment, Feng Qingyun was treating his injuries in the bedroom. With eldest senior brother's kind and tolerant personality, he rarely offended anyone. The person who had ambushed him at this time was probably after the cultivation resources that even a martial king expert would be tempted by. In other words, eldest senior brother had been ambushed and seriously injured because of him. If he hadn't been in a hurry to return to Hidden Moon Pavilion and had stayed to receive the reward for clearing the secret realm, he would have been the one who had been ambushed. With the secret technique that he had mastered to overdraw his potential and his peak martial king mental state, unless it was a martial king expert, it would be impossible for the ambush to succeed. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran was furious. He couldn't help but blame himself. He blamed himself for his carelessness and his selfishness. "Jingjun, come here." If he wanted to avenge eldest senior brother, he needed to know who had ambushed him. Therefore, he called Wu Jingjun, who had experienced this incident, to his side and interrogated him about the details of the ambush. Chu Zhongyu and Wu Jingjun had been ambushed in a dense forest at the junction of Xian Yun Peak and De Yun Peak. There were 8 people who had ambushed them. Among them, 1 was at the peak of 9th grade martial great realm, 2 were at the peak of 7th grade martial great realm, 4 were at the peak of 3rd grade martial great realm, and 1 was at the peak of martial master. Chu Zhongyu had been injured by the combined attack of the 7 martial ancestor realm expert. Through Wu Jingjuan's explanation, Yu Haoran knew that the ambush was not only an ambush, but also a meticulous plan. Among them, the 7 martial Great Realm experts had used the combined attack to deal with Chu Zhongyu. The martial master probably wanted to deal with him. This fully showed that the ambush was very likely to have been set up in advance when he had just survived the tenfold gravity and didn't know about the reward for clearing the secret realm. Chapter 119. Qingyun Peak, Qingzhou Pavilion. As the eldest senior brother of the Qingyun faction, there were many people in the 100 Qi Gate who understood Chu Zhongyu's character. Just from this point alone, there was no way to determine who the attacker was. However, to be able to use the combined attack technique and display the strongest power of the combined attack technique, these 8 people were definitely from the same faction and had a very good relationship with each other. At the same time, daring to kill and rob in the sect without fear of being investigated showed that these 8 people belonged to a powerful faction. Even if they were investigated, they would not be afraid. Thinking of this, a few suspicious factions appeared on Yu Haoran's list. Among them, the most suspicious faction was the faction of the 100 Qi Gates leader, Zhao Ji. Although Zhao Ji was restricted by the Liyan faction and the Board of Elders, which prevented his faction from leading the entire 100 Qi Gate, as a martial emperor expert and the nominal leader of the 100 Qi Gate, Zhao Ji's faction was also very powerful. It was not difficult to gather 7 martial arts sect elite disciples who had a good relationship and knew the combined attack technique. However, the suspicion of Zhao Ji's faction was quickly reduced to the lowest in Yu Haoran's heart. In order to restore the glory of the 100 Qi Gate, Zhao Ji had been accumulating strength and secretly roping in different factions. Although the Qingyun faction did not have many people and was not very powerful, their future potential was limitless. To the elite disciples of Zhao Ji's faction, the Qingyun Peak was definitely worth the effort to rope in. They would not offend the Qingyun Peak for such a small benefit. The second suspect was the Achievement Hall, or rather the vice leader of the Liyan faction. Because of the Liyan faction's power in the 100 Qi Gate, their faction was very domineering and did things without any scruples. It was not like they had not done things like killing and robbing in the sect. However, thinking that the Liyan faction was dealing with the secrets recorded in the account book with Zhao Ji and Zhong Fakan, and that the Achievement Hall leader, Jia Tongxi, was personally arrested by the Peak Master of the Enforcement Peak, the entire Liyan faction was in a state of panic and would not dare to cause trouble at this time. Therefore, the suspicion of the Liyan faction was also reduced to the lowest. As for Diyun Peak and Tingxian Peak, although they were also very suspicious, after careful consideration, they either did not meet the conditions for a sneak attack, or it was not worth it to do so. After elimination one by one, Yu Haoran's suspicions pointed to the Enforcement Peak. Because they had the ability to conduct a sneak attack and were not afraid of investigation, they disdained roping in any factions, and had not been in any trouble recently. They were the most suspicious Peak faction, was the most suitable faction was also the most suitable faction for a sneak attack. Yu Haoran was quite familiar with the law enforcement Peak. Was Zhao Ji's sect's punishment hall? Sect? Peak's sect disciples Peak. Therefore, he planned to use the other party's figure and appearance to further confirm his guess. Jingjun, describe the figures and characteristics of those 8 people to me. 9th Senior Martial Brother, the 7 Martial Ancestor Realm experts moved too quickly. I can't describe their figures in detail. But I have a very clear impression of the Martial Master who wanted to attack me but was injured by eldest Senior Martial Brother. After that, Wu Jingjun not only described the man's figure in detail, but he also described how the man walked and the anger in his eyes after being injured by the shock wave. Unfortunately, there were many disciples in the Enforcement Peak. There were even more disciples in the martial master realm. There were almost 1,000 of them. Furthermore, he could not have interacted with all of them in his previous life. Therefore, Yu Haoran had no impression of the martial realm expert that Wu Jingjun described. This made it impossible for him to confirm the identity of the opponent in a short period of time. Just as Yu Haoran continued to think and see if he could find the culprit from other places, the door to Chu Zhongyu's room suddenly opened. Feng Qinyan walked out with a serious expression. "Master, how is eldest senior martial brother?" Second senior martial brother Lu Guangwei asked anxiously. Shaking his head, Feng Qinyan said in a serious tone, "I've already helped his body and Dantian recover. However, I can't do anything about his spiritual strength. He can only rely on himself to recover slowly." Hearing that Chu Zhongyu's spiritual strength had been severely injured, the killing intent that he had suppressed with great difficulty surged again. It seemed that the opponent's goal was not only the reward for clearing the secret territory, but also his and Chu Zhongyu's lives. This made Yu Haoran's killing intent even stronger. "Fine. Since you want my life, then you will have to bear my Yu Haoran's wrath. I will let you have a taste of the methods of the merciless Sword Emperor in my previous life. Master, can I go see eldest senior martial brother?" If he wanted to confirm the opponent's identity, he needed more detailed information. Yu Haoran planned to use Chu Zhongyu's injuries to continue searching for clues left behind by the culprit. "Yes, but don't take too long. Your eldest senior martial brother needs a quiet environment to recover his injured spiritual strength." After giving his instructions, Feng Qinyan frowned and looked at Yu Haoran. This was because he could clearly feel the anger burning in Yu Haoran's heart. He could not help but feel worried. From how Yu Haoran calmly resolved Jia Tongshi's slander, how he used various means to threaten the black and white impermanence, and how he used the power of the 3 sect masters to force Jia Tongshi into a corner, it could be seen that Yu Haoran was a person with outstanding intelligence, and that he was a person who used small means to achieve great things. He was worried that Yu Haoran would use some clues to find the culprit behind the sneak attack on Chu Zhongyu, which would lead to internal strife in the 100 Qi Gate. Therefore, before leaving, he reminded him, "Haoran, after seeing your eldest senior martial brother, come to the Righteous Peace residence. I have something to tell you." "Yes, master." Yu Haoran nodded and walked into the bedroom. He saw his eldest senior martial brother lying on the bed. His breathing was steady, but his eldest senior martial brother's aura was very weak. He walked up to Chu Zhongyu and placed his hand on his wrist, using his senses to check his condition. However, the final result was that his body was stronger than a wild beast. "Thaling, can you help me check on eldest senior martial brother and see how his spiritual strength was injured and how serious the injury was?" If he wanted to check on eldest senior martial brother's spiritual strength, he had to use the power of his spiritual strength. Moreover, his spiritual strength had to be higher than eldest senior martial brother's. Therefore, he could only ask Thaling for help. His spiritual strength was superimposed on his spiritual strength. His spiritual strength was almost destroyed. Given how well Chu Zhongyu cared for Yu Haoran, even if Yu Haoran did not ask for help, he would have taken the initiative to check on the situation. "It's all right." Although his spiritual strength was almost destroyed, the reason for the injury was only a clash of spiritual strengths. It was a physical injury that was relatively easy to treat. Since eldest senior martial brother's life was not in danger for the time being, Yu Haoran secretly breathed a sigh of relief. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.